He was the most powerful man in England until the woman he destroyed became the only one who could save him. When Duke Adrian Blackthorne's calculated move to protect Eliza Hartwell explodes into public scandal, their pride, their reputations, and their futures hang by a thread. In a world where one misstep means ruin, two enemies must become allies or lose everything. Will love survive when the entire empire turns against them? If you want to see how a duke falls and a woman rises, stay until the end. Like this video and comment which city you're watching from. The ballroom glittered like a jewel box tipped on its side, all crystal chandeliers and silk gowns swirling beneath gilded ceilings. The London season was in full bloom, and tonight Ashford House hosted the most coveted event of the year. Every eligible woman in England had fought for an invitation. Every ambitious mother had schemed for months. And at the center of it all stood Adrian Blackthorne, the Duke of Ashford, alone in a sea of admirers. He was 32, devastatingly handsome, and so wealthy that even the Prince Regent owed him favors. Dark hair swept back from a face carved with aristocratic precision, sharp jawline, storm gray eyes that could freeze a man mid-sentence or melt a woman's resolve with a single glance. He stood 6 feet 3 inches tall, his shoulders broad beneath a perfectly tailored black coat, his posture radiating the kind of power that came not from arrogance, but from absolute certainty. Women whispered his name like a prayer. Men envied him with barely concealed resentment. He was everything society worshipped: title, fortune, influence, and he felt nothing. Adrian raised his champagne glass to his lips, the bubbles tasteless on his tongue. Around him, conversations hummed with the same tedious rhythm they always did. "Your Grace, you simply must visit our estate this summer. Duke Blackthorne, my daughter plays the pianoforte exquisitely. I dare say, Your Grace, no one commands a room quite like you." Flattery, ambition, desperation dressed in diamond necklaces and false smiles. He'd heard it all 1,000 times. Every compliment was a transaction, every batting eyelash a negotiation. These women didn't see Adrian Blackthorne, the man who read philosophy at dawn and walked his estate alone because silence felt more honest than conversation. They saw the Duke of Ashford, a prize to be won, a title to secure, a fortune to inherit. "Your Grace?" Adrian turned. Lady Caroline Pemberton stood before him, her blonde curls perfectly arranged, her smile practiced to devastating effect. She was beautiful, accomplished, and utterly predictable. "Yes, Lady Caroline. I was hoping you might honor me with a dance." Her voice was honey-sweet, her eyes bright with calculated interest. Adrian knew this dance, not the waltz she was requesting, but the social maneuvering that would follow. One dance would lead to whispered speculation. 2 dances would spark rumors. 3 would practically announce an engagement. "I'm afraid I'm not dancing this evening," Adrian said, his tone polite but final. Disappointment flickered across her face before she recovered with practiced grace. "Of course, Your Grace. Perhaps another time." She curtsied and retreated, immediately surrounded by her friends, who leaned in to hear the outcome of her attempt. Adrian watched the familiar pattern unfold: disappointment, reassurance, renewed determination. By tomorrow, another young lady would make her approach, armed with a different strategy but the same goal. "You're breaking hearts left and right, Ashford." Adrian glanced to his left. Marcus Thornfield, Viscount Hartley, stood beside him with an amused smirk. Unlike most of society, Marcus had known Adrian since Cambridge. He was one of the few people who saw past the title. "They'll survive," Adrian said dryly. "Barely." Marcus gestured toward the ballroom with his glass. "Look at them. You'd think you were the last man in England." "Sometimes I wonder if I am. The last man, I mean. The rest seem to be decorative statues with trust funds." Marcus laughed. "Careful. Your cynicism is showing." "Is it cynicism when it's true?" "Fair point." Marcus studied him. "You know, most men would kill for your position. Every door open, every woman available, every opportunity at your fingertips." "And yet," Adrian said quietly, "I feel like I'm suffocating." Marcus's expression sobered. "Then why stay? You could leave London, travel, disappear for a while. To what end? The emptiness follows me." Adrian set his glass down on a passing tray. "No, the problem isn't London. It's this—" He gestured vaguely at the glittering crowd. "This performance. Everyone playing a role, everyone wanting something, No one's seen anything real. You're a duke, Adrian. People will always want something from you. I know. Adrian's jaw tightened. That's precisely the problem. Before Marcus could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. The crowd parted slightly, and Adrian caught a glimpse of someone new, a woman in a deep green gown, her dark hair swept into a simple style that stood out among the elaborate arrangements around her. She wasn't trying to command attention. If anything, she seemed to wish she were anywhere else. Who is that? Adrian asked. Marcus followed his gaze. Ah, that would be Miss Eliza Hartwell, the late Earl of Hartwell's daughter. Hartwell? Adrian frowned. I didn't know he had a daughter. Most people didn't. She grew up on the estate, far from London. The Earl died 3 months ago, hunting accident. She's here to settle affairs and find a buyer for the property. Adrian watched as Eliza Hartwell navigated the edge of the ballroom, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. Unlike the other women, who preened and positioned themselves strategically, she seemed to be actively avoiding notice. She's selling Hartwell Manor? Adrian asked, surprised. The estate was one of the finest in Derbyshire. Has to. The Earl left debts, massive ones. The estate is mortgaged to the hilt. She's trying to sell before the creditors seize everything. That's unfortunate. It's a disaster, Marcus corrected. She's 24, unmarried, with no prospects and no fortune. Once Hartwell Manor is gone, she'll have nothing. She'll be lucky to find a position as a governess. Adrian studied her more carefully. There was something in the way she held herself, a quiet dignity despite her obvious discomfort. She didn't simper or flirt. She didn't position herself to be seen. She simply existed, with a kind of self-possession that felt startlingly rare in this world of performance and pretense. Introduce me, Adrian said suddenly. Marcus raised an eyebrow. To Miss Hartwell? Yes. Adrian, she has no fortune, no connections. She's practically ruined. Oh, then she'll be refreshingly honest. Everyone else here wants my title. She has no reason to pretend. Marcus looked skeptical but nodded. Your funeral. They crossed the ballroom, and Adrian felt a strange anticipation building in his chest. For the first time in months, years perhaps, he was genuinely curious about someone. Miss Hartwell, Marcus said warmly as they approached. May I present the Duke of Ashford? Your Grace, this is Miss Eliza Hartwell. She turned, and Adrian found himself looking into the most extraordinary eyes he'd ever seen, not blue or green or brown, but a shifting hazel that seemed to change in the light. Her face was striking rather than conventionally beautiful. High cheekbones, a stubborn chin, lips pressed into a line that suggested she was barely tolerating this entire event. Your Grace, she curtsied, the movement precise but perfunctory. Miss Hartwell? Adrian bowed. I understand you're recently arrived in London. I am. And how are you finding the season? Tedious. Marcus choked on his champagne. Adrian felt a smile tug at his lips, a genuine one, the first in weeks. Tedious, he repeated. That's direct. You asked my opinion. I gave it. Eliza's gaze was steady, unflinching. Or did you expect me to simper and say it's all terribly wonderful? Most people do. Most people are lying. Adrian laughed, a real surprise sound that drew startled glances from nearby guests. He couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to him with such blunt honesty. I appreciate your candor, Miss Hartwell. I doubt that, she said coolly. Men like you don't appreciate candor. You appreciate agreement. Men like me? Powerful, wealthy, accustomed to having everyone cater to your whims. She tilted her head slightly. Tell me, Your Grace, when was the last time someone told you no? The question landed like a slap. Adrian stared at her, momentarily speechless. Around them, conversation had died. People were watching now, sensing something unusual in the exchange. Marcus cleared his throat. Miss Hartwell, perhaps I should be more careful with my words, Eliza finished. Her smile was sharp. Perhaps, but I find that honesty saves time, and I have very little time to waste on games. Games, Adrian repeated slowly. He should have been offended. He should have walked away. Instead, he felt more alive than he had in months. You think I'm playing a game, aren't you? This entire evening is a game. Everyone here is playing their role, the eligible bachelor, the ambitious debutante, the scheming mother. You wear your title like armor, and everyone treats you like you're made of gold instead of flesh and blood. And you? Adrian asked, his voice low. What role are you playing? The desperate woman trying to save her family's legacy before men like you swallow it whole. The words were a gauntlet thrown. Adrian felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the carefully constructed walls he'd built around himself. I have no interest in your estate, Miss Hartwell. Not yet, she said. But give it time. Men like you always want more. It's never enough, is it? All this, she gestured at the ballroom, the wealth, the power. And you still look hungry. She'd seen it. Somehow this woman he'd met 5 minutes ago had looked past the title, the fortune, the perfect facade, and seen the emptiness beneath. It should have terrified him. Instead, it thrilled him. You're right, Adrian said quietly. It's not enough. It's never enough. Eliza's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her features. She'd expected denial, perhaps anger, not agreement. Then I pity you, Your Grace, she said, her voice softer now. Because if all this isn't enough, nothing ever will be. She curtsied again, properly this time, with something that might have been genuine respect, and turned to walk away. Wait, Adrian said. She paused, glancing back. Yes? Dance with me. No. The refusal was immediate, unequivocal. Around them, gasps rippled through the crowd. The Duke of Ashford rejected. Publicly. Adrian felt a slow smile spread across his face. Why not? Because I don't want to. That's not a reason. It's the only reason that matters. Eliza met his gaze steadily. I don't know what game you're playing, Your Grace, but I'm not a piece on your board. Find someone else to amuse you. She walked away, her green dress disappearing into the crowd. Adrian stood frozen, aware that every eye in the ballroom was on him, waiting to see how he'd react to such unprecedented rejection. Marcus whistled low. Well, that was something. Yes, Adrian said slowly. It was. You're smiling. Am I? Like a madman. Are you all right? Adrian turned to his friend, and for the first time in years he felt something besides emptiness. I'm perfect. Absolutely perfect. She just humiliated you in front of half of London. She did. And you're, pleased. She's the first person in 5 years who's treated me like a human being instead of a title. Adrian's eyes tracked across the ballroom, searching for another glimpse of green silk. She doesn't want anything from me. Because she can't get anything from you. She's broke, Adrian. Desperate. Then why refuse a dance? Why refuse attention from a duke when her entire future depends on making advantageous connections? Marcus had no answer for that. Adrian spent the rest of the evening watching Eliza Hartwell from a distance. She didn't dance. She didn't flirt. She stood at the periphery, engaging in polite but brief conversations, clearly counting the minutes until she could escape. She was everything this world wasn't, honest, direct, unimpressed by spectacle. She'd looked at him and seen not the Duke of Ashford, but Adrian Blackthorne, a man so surrounded by luxury he'd forgotten what it felt like to want something real. For the first time in years, Adrian wanted something, someone, and for the first time in his life, that someone wanted nothing to do with him. The realization should have been discouraging. Instead, it felt like possibility. 3 days later, Adrian stood outside Hartwell House, a modest townhouse in an unfashionable part of London. The building was respectable but clearly struggling, its paint faded, its windows in need of repair. He told himself he was simply being neighborly, a courtesy call. After all, the Earl of Hartwell had been a peer, even if they'd never been close. It was only proper to express condolences to the daughter. He was lying to himself, and he knew it. Adrian knocked. A moment later, a harried-looking maid answered, her eyes widening when she saw his crest. Your Grace, she curtsied frantically. We weren't expecting, that is, I'll fetch Miss Hartwell immediately. No need. Eliza's voice came from inside. She appeared in the doorway, wearing a simple day dress of gray muslin, her hair pulled back in a practical knot. She looked tired, he noticed. There were shadows under her eyes. Your Grace, she said flatly. What a surprise. Miss Hartwell, I came to express my condolences regarding your father. How kind. Her tone suggested it was anything but. You've expressed them. Good day. She started to close the door. Adrian put his hand against it. I'd also like to discuss your estate. Her eyes narrowed. I knew it. 3 days. I thought it would take at least a week before the vultures started circling. I'm not a vulture. No, you're a duke, much more dangerous. She crossed her arms. I'm not selling to you. You haven't heard my offer. I don't need to. Whatever you're offering, it's not enough. Hartwell Manor is worth approximately £12,000 in current market conditions, Adrian said calmly. I'll give you 15. Eliza blinked. That's 3,000 over value, enough to pay your father's debts and leave you with a modest independence. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Hope, perhaps. Relief. Then it vanished, replaced by suspicion. Why? Why what? Why would you pay more than it's worth? She studied him intently. What do you really want? The land. Why? You already own half of Derbyshire. 3/5, actually, Adrian corrected. Hartwell Manor shares a border with my primary estate. Consolidating the properties would be efficient. Efficient. Eliza's laugh was bitter. You want to swallow my family's legacy for the sake of efficiency. I want to make you a fair offer. Fair would be letting me keep my home. Fair would be acknowledging that my family has lived on that land for 200 years. But you don't care about that, do you? To you, it's just another acquisition, another piece of property to add to your collection. That's not— Thank you for your offer, Your Grace, Eliza interrupted, her voice icy. My answer is no. Now please leave. Miss Hartwell. Leave! She slammed the door in his face. Adrian stood on the doorstep, staring at the peeling paint, aware that he'd handled that spectacularly badly. He'd come with good intentions, or so he'd told himself, but Eliza was right. He'd approached her estate like a business transaction, not understanding that to her it was so much more. Behind the door, he heard raised voices. Ridiculous, Eliza, £15,000. I don't care if he offered 50,000, Anne. I'm not selling to him. Then who will you sell to? The creditors are circling. We have 3 months before they seize everything. 3 months. I'll find another buyer. There are no other buyers. No one wants an estate that size in Derbyshire. It's too remote, too expensive to maintain. The Duke is your only option. Then I'll find a way to keep it. With what? We have no money, no income. Father's debts. I know what father's debts are. Eliza's voice cracked. I know exactly how desperate we are, but I won't sell our home to a man who sees it as nothing more than a line item in his ledger. Adrian should have walked away. Instead, he found himself standing there, listening, understanding for the first time the true weight of Eliza's situation. She wasn't just selling a property, she was losing her home, her history, her identity. And he'd walked in and treated it like a business deal. No wonder she'd slammed the door in his face. Slowly, Adrian descended the steps and climbed into his waiting carriage. As it pulled away, he glanced back at Hartwell House, at the peeling paint and cracked windows, and made a decision. If Eliza Hartwell wouldn't accept his help directly, he'd find another way. He'd save her estate. And maybe, in doing so, he'd find something worth saving in himself. What Adrian didn't realize, what he couldn't have known, was that his good intentions would become the spark that would burn both their worlds to ash. Adrian didn't give up. He couldn't. Over the next 2 weeks, he became a fixture outside Hartwell House. Not obviously, he wasn't fool enough to camp on her doorstep, but his carriage appeared at strategic intervals. He engineered chance encounters at the market, at the lending library, at the modiste where Eliza's sister Anne was having a dress altered on credit they couldn't afford. Each time, Eliza's response was the same, cold civility that barely masked contempt. Good morning, Miss Hartwell. Your Grace. She wouldn't even slow her pace. Lovely weather we're having. Is it? I hadn't noticed. She'd brushed past him, her sister trailing behind with apologetic glances. I was hoping we might discuss— We have nothing to discuss, Your Grace. Good day. The rejection should have discouraged him. Instead, they only sharpened his determination. Because beneath Eliza's frost, He sensed something else. A crack in her armor. A hint of curiosity she couldn't quite suppress. The way her eyes would linger on him for a fraction of a second before she looked away. The slight hesitation before she dismissed him. The color that rose in her cheeks when he appeared unexpectedly. She felt it too, this inexplicable pull between them. She just refused to acknowledge it. But Adrian was nothing if not persistent. And beneath Eliza's defenses, he was beginning to understand the woman who'd built them. Intelligent, proud, wounded by circumstances beyond her control, and absolutely determined to survive on her own terms. Marcus thought he was insane. "You've been rejected 17 times in 2 weeks," Marcus said over brandy one evening. "Most men would take the hint. I'm not most men. Clearly. Most men have self-preservation instincts." Marcus swirled his glass. "What exactly is your plan here? Wear her down through sheer persistence? My plan is to prove I'm not what she thinks I am." "And what does she think you are?" "A powerful man who will use that power to control her." Adrian stared into the fire. "She's not entirely wrong. I have used my position thoughtlessly. I've made assumptions about what people need without asking them. I've operated from a place of privilege without considering how that appears to someone without it." "So you're pursuing her to what? Prove you've had an epiphany?" "I'm pursuing her because she's the first person who's ever called me on my arrogance, because she refuses to be impressed by things that don't matter, because when she looks at me, she sees Adrian Blackthorne, not the Duke of Ashford." Adrian set down his glass. "And because I can't stop thinking about her." Marcus sighed. "You're in love with her." "I don't know what I am. Obsessed, maybe. Fascinated, certainly." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "All I know is that before I met her, I was going through the motions of a life that meant nothing. And now I want things. I want to matter to someone. I want to be seen. I want her." "Yes, her. Even though she clearly wants nothing to do with you?" "Especially then, because if I can earn the respect of someone who has every reason to despise me, maybe I'm worth something after all." Marcus studied him for a long moment. "You know that's not healthy, right? Basing your worth on someone else's opinion?" "I know, but it's the truth anyway." The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Adrian found her in the British Museum, standing alone before a marble statue of Athena. She wore the same gray dress she'd worn for days. He'd noticed she only had 3 dresses, rotating them with careful precision. Her hair was coming loose from its pins, and there was ink on her fingers. She looked tired, beautiful, untouchable. "Wisdom and warfare," Adrian said quietly, coming to stand beside her. "An interesting combination." Eliza stiffened but didn't walk away. "Progress." "She was the goddess of strategic warfare, not mindless violence. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Of course. Strategy requires intelligence, foresight, the ability to see several moves ahead." She glanced at him. "Something you'd know about, I imagine." "You think I'm strategic?" "I think you're relentless." Eliza turned back to the statue. "You've been following me for 2 weeks. Why?" "I want to help you." "By buying my estate?" "By saving it." She laughed, sharp, bitter. "You can't save something by destroying it." "What if I'm not trying to destroy it?" Adrian moved closer, lowering his voice. "What if there's another way?" "There isn't." "How do you know? You won't even listen to alternatives." "Because I know how this ends." Eliza's hands clenched at her sides. "You want the land. I need money. You have all the power and I have none. That's not a negotiation. It's a surrender." "It doesn't have to be." "Doesn't it?" She finally looked at him fully, and the exhaustion in her eyes struck him like a blow. "You live in a different world than I do, Your Grace. In your world, problems are solved with money and influence. In mine, problems crush you slowly until there's nothing left. You want to help? Then leave me alone and let me manage my own ruin with dignity." "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because you're the first real thing I've encountered in years," Adrian thought. "Because when you look at me, you see a man, not a title. Because you challenge me and infuriate me and make me feel alive." "Because it's a waste," he said instead. "You're intelligent, capable. You shouldn't have to lose everything because your father made poor choices." "Life isn't fair, Your Grace. Surely even dukes know that." "They do. But that doesn't mean we accept it." Eliza studied him for a long moment. Around them, the museum was nearly empty. Just a few scholars bent over manuscripts, the quiet scratch of quills on paper. Rain hammered against tall windows, turning the world outside gray and indistinct. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "And don't say nothing. Everyone wants something." "I want you to trust me." "Trust?" She said the word like it was foreign. "You want me to trust the man trying to buy my family home?" "I want you to trust that I see more than just land when I look at Hartwell Manor. I see history, legacy, home." Adrian paused. "I want you to trust that I understand what it means to have everything and feel empty, and what it might mean to have very little and feel whole." Eliza's expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "You're very strange, Your Grace." "I've been called worse." "I'm sure you have." A hint of a smile touched her lips, gone as quickly as it appeared. "But trust isn't given freely. It's earned." "Then tell me how to earn it." "I don't know if you can." Eliza turned back to Athena. "We're too different. You see problems as puzzles to solve. I see them as battles to survive. You operate from a position of power. I operate from desperation. Those perspectives don't align." "They could." "Could they?" Her voice was soft now, almost wistful. "Or are you just bored, Your Grace, looking for a project to occupy your time? Because I'm not a charity case or a puzzle or a conquest. I'm a woman trying to save the only thing I have left. And I can't afford to be your temporary fascination." The words stung because they were partially true. Adrian had been bored, listless and hollow, and searching for something, anything, to make him feel human again. But Eliza wasn't a temporary fascination. She was something far more dangerous. She was a mirror, reflecting back all the emptiness he'd been hiding from. "You're not a fascination," Adrian said quietly. "You're the first person who's told me the truth in 5 years. That's worth more than you know." Eliza looked at him then, really looked, and for a moment something passed between them. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition. Two people standing in the wreckage of their different disasters, seeing in each other something worth salvaging. Then she blinked and the walls came back up. "I should go. Anne will worry. Let me walk you home." "No." "It's raining. I have an umbrella." "Miss Hartwell, goodbye, Your Grace." She walked away, her footsteps echoing on marble floors, leaving Adrian alone with Athena and the growing certainty that he was falling for a woman who wanted nothing to do with him. The realization should have been sobering. Instead, it only made him more determined. But determination, Adrian was about to learn, could be as dangerous as indifference. That evening, Adrian summoned his steward to his study. Richard Morrison had served the Blackthorne family for 30 years and knew every detail of the estate's finances. "I need information on the Hartwell debts," Adrian said without preamble. "Everything. Who holds the notes, what the terms are, when they're due." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "The Hartwell estate, Your Grace. I thought that inquiry had been set aside." "It hasn't. It's been expanded." Adrian leaned back in his chair. "I want to know exactly how much is owed and to whom. And I want to know if there are any irregularities." "Irregularities?" "The Earl of Hartwell was a careful man by all accounts. It seems strange that he'd leave his estate in such dire circumstances unless something went wrong." "I want to know what?" Morrison nodded slowly. "I'll make inquiries, discreetly. Not too discreetly. I want the creditors to know someone's asking questions. Someone with resources. You're planning to intervene. I'm planning to understand the situation. What happens after that depends on what you find." Morrison left, and Adrian sat alone in the darkening study, staring at the fire. He knew this was dangerous, not financially, but emotionally. He was involving himself in Eliza's life without her permission, operating from the shadows to solve a problem she hadn't asked him to fix. But what choice did he have? She'd never accept direct help. Pride wouldn't allow it. So he'd work quietly, behind the scenes, and once the debts were settled, she'd be free to keep Hartwell Manor without ever knowing he'd been involved. It was, he told himself, the perfect solution. He was catastrophically wrong. The investigation took 3 days. When Morrison returned, his expression was grim, and he carried a thick folder of documents. It's worse than we thought, Morrison said, spreading papers across Adrian's desk. The Earl didn't just have debts. He had debts to very specific people. Lord Pemberton holds the largest note, £3,500. Adrian's jaw tightened. Pemberton, the same man whose daughter Caroline had tried to trap him into marriage at last season's balls. Pemberton, Adrian said slowly. And when is the note due? 6 weeks. And there's more. Morrison pulled out another document. Pemberton structured the note with a specific clause. If the Hartwells default, he doesn't just get the money, he gets first right of purchase on the estate, at a price he sets. That's predatory. It's legal, barely. Morrison's face was tight with disgust. The Earl was desperate. He signed because he had no choice. Pemberton knew exactly what he was doing. Adrian felt rage building in his chest. Cold, calculated rage. Pemberton wasn't just a creditor. He was a vulture, deliberately structuring the debt to force the Hartwells into ruin so he could acquire their land for pennies on the pound. What's Pemberton's interest in Hartwell Manor? Adrian asked, though he suspected he already knew. It shares a border with his northern holdings. He's been trying to acquire it for years. The Earl always refused. Morrison paused. There's also the matter of the river access. Hartwell Manor controls the only deep-water landing for 15 miles. Whoever owns that land controls trade in the region. So he engineered the whole thing. It appears so. The original loan was legitimate. The Earl needed funds for improvements after a bad harvest. But Pemberton kept offering extensions with increasingly punitive terms. The Earl thought he was being helped. He didn't realize he was being trapped. Adrian stood and walked to the window, looking out over the London streets. Below, people hurried about their business, unaware that in this study, the fate of an estate and a woman's future was being decided. Eliza was right. The world was harsh, brutal to those without power, and men like Pemberton exploited that brutality without a second thought. But Adrian had power, and he could use it. I want you to buy Pemberton's note, Adrian said quietly. Morrison went very still. Your Grace, that's... I want you to approach him directly. Offer him £4,000 for immediate sale of the debt. He'll know you're involved. $4,000 for a £3,500 note? That's well over value. Let him know. Offer him the money today. I want that note transferred to me by week's end. And once you own it? Adrian turned from the window. Once I own it, I'll forgive it. The Hartwells keep their estate. The debt is erased. Pemberton's trap is sprung with no prey inside. Morrison's expression was deeply conflicted. That's very generous, Your Grace, but Miss Hartwell will know what you've done. She'll know you intervened. Perhaps, but what can she do? The debt will be gone. She'll be free. Free, yes, but also indebted to you in ways that can't be measured in pounds. Morrison chose his words carefully. A woman like Miss Hartwell, she won't see this as rescue. She'll see it as manipulation. As you exercising power, she doesn't have to solve her problems without her consent. Then I'll explain. With respect, Your Grace, you can't explain your way out of this. You'll have solved her problem without asking her permission. You'll have exercised power she doesn't possess. You'll have made decisions about her life that should be hers to make. Morrison's voice softened. That's not rescue. That's control. And from what you've told me about Miss Hartwell, control is exactly what she fears most. Adrian opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Morrison was right. He could see it now, how Eliza would react when she discovered what he'd done. The fury in her eyes. The sense of betrayal. The confirmation of her worst fears about powerful men who thought they knew best. But what was the alternative? Let Pemberton crush her? Let her lose everything because Adrian was too afraid of her anger to act? Stand by and watch while a predator destroyed an innocent woman because helping her without permission was morally complicated? Do it anyway, Adrian said finally. Buy the note. I'll deal with the consequences. Morrison looked like he wanted to argue further, but he simply nodded. As you wish, Your Grace. He gathered the documents and left. Adrian was alone again with his decision and the growing certainty that he'd just made a terrible mistake. But it was done. The choice was made. And perhaps in time, Eliza would understand that he'd acted out of, what? Love? He barely knew her. Compassion? Arrogance? The truth was more complicated and far more selfish. He'd acted because he couldn't bear to see her destroyed. Because in saving her, he might save something in himself. Because watching her fight alone while he had the power to help felt like cowardice. The problem was that nobility and arrogance often looked identical from the outside. And Eliza, he knew, would only see the arrogance. Adrian walked back to his desk and poured himself a drink he didn't want. Outside, evening was falling over London. Somewhere in this vast city, Eliza was preparing for bed, unaware that her greatest enemy had just been neutralized and her reluctant savior had just made the mistake that would destroy them both. Time, Adrian thought grimly, would tell whether this was the best or worst decision of his life. He had a sinking feeling he already knew the answer. The transaction moved with terrifying speed. Pemberton accepted the offer within hours, £4,000 for a note worth $3,500. The premium told Adrian everything he needed to know about Pemberton's character. The man would take a quick profit over a long game, which meant he'd never cared about Hartwell Manor itself. He'd only wanted to hurt the family that had refused him for years, and when offered an easy exit with profit, he took it without hesitation. The note was transferred by Friday. The debt was now Adrian's, and he had precisely 48 hours before Eliza would find out. He spent those hours planning what to say, how to explain, rehearsing justifications that sounded weaker each time he repeated them. How could he make her understand that he'd acted out of genuine concern, not a desire to control? That stopping Pemberton had been necessary, not optional? That sometimes power had to be used, even if the use of it complicated everything? But he never got the chance to explain. The scandal broke on a Tuesday morning, and it broke spectacularly. Adrian was at breakfast when Marcus burst into the dining room without being announced, a newspaper clutched in his hand and panic written across his face. "Have you seen this?" Marcus demanded, slapping the paper down on the table so hard the china rattled. Adrian picked it up with numb fingers, and his blood turned to ice. The headline screamed, "Duke's Secret Maneuver, Blackthorne Acquires Hartwell Debt in Shadowy Deal." Below it, a detailed account of the transaction, the amount, the terms, the suspicious speed of the purchase. The article laid out every detail with gleeful precision, making it sound like a conspiracy rather than a legitimate business transaction. But it was the final paragraph that destroyed everything. Sources close to Miss Eliza Hartwell suggest the Duke's interest in the estate may be of a more personal nature. One wonders what other arrangements were made behind closed doors. The Duke's sudden acquisition of the debt, coupled with his repeated attempts to meet with Miss Hartwell in recent weeks, paints a concerning picture. Has the desperate young woman been forced into compromising arrangements to save her family's legacy? Society deserves answers. The implication was clear, ugly, devastating. Who wrote this? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. It doesn't matter who wrote it. What matters is everyone's reading it. Marcus collapsed into a chair, looking ill. Adrian, they're saying you bought influence over her, that you're using the debt as leverage for personal favors. They're calling her your mistress in everything but name. That's a lie. Of course it's a lie. But since when has truth mattered in London gossip? Marcus ran his hands through his hair. By this afternoon, half of society will believe you've compromised her, and the other half will believe she sold herself to you to save her estate. Either way, she's ruined. Adrian's hands clenched around the newspaper, crumpling it. I was trying to help her. I know, but you did it in secret, through back channels, using your power and money to solve her problems without asking her permission. How do you think that looks to people who don't know your intentions? I didn't think... No, you didn't. You acted like a duke. Decisive, powerful, certain you knew best. You never considered how it would appear to her, or to society. Marcus's voice was harsh with frustration. You treated her problem like a business transaction. You didn't think about optics or reputation or how a vulnerable woman would be perceived when a powerful man takes financial control of her life. I need to see her. I need to explain. She won't see you after this. Adrian, she'll never see you again. But Adrian was already moving, grabbing his coat, shouting for his carriage. Because Marcus was wrong. Eliza would see him. She had to. This was all a terrible misunderstanding that could be cleared up with conversation, with honesty, with an explanation of his true intentions. He was still clinging to that desperate hope when his carriage pulled up outside Hartwell House 20 minutes later. The door was answered by Anne, Eliza's sister. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying, her face blotchy with grief. "Your Grace," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "My sister isn't receiving visitors. I need to speak with her. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" The voice came from inside, Eliza's voice, sharp with fury and something that sounded like broken glass. "Is that what you call it?" She appeared in the doorway, and Adrian's heart cracked. Her face was pale as death, her eyes blazing with anger and something worse, betrayal so profound it seemed to radiate from her like heat. "Miss Hartwell, please. Let me explain." "Explain what? How you manipulated my family's debt? How you used your power to control my future without my knowledge or consent? How you made me look like a whore in front of all of London?" Her voice rose with each word, raw and ragged. The word hung between them, whore, ugly and brutal and undeserved. "I never... That's not what I intended. Eliza, please." "What you intended doesn't matter." Her voice cracked, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "What matters is what you did. You took away my agency, my choice, my dignity. You decided you knew better than me how to handle my own life. And now everyone thinks I'm your mistress, bought and paid for with a canceled debt." "That's not true. I can issue a statement. I can make them understand." "A statement? You think a statement will fix this?" She laughed, wild and broken. "You're a duke, Your Grace. When you make a mistake, you issue a statement and move on with your comfortable life. When I make a mistake, or when someone makes one for me, I'm ruined, permanently, irrevocably, destroyed. Do you understand? My name is filth now. No one will hire me. No one will receive me. No respectable family will even acknowledge my existence." Anne was crying openly now, clutching the doorframe. Behind Eliza, Adrian could see their few possessions already being packed into crates. They were leaving, running from the scandal he'd created. "Where will you go?" Adrian asked, his voice hoarse. "Anywhere you're not." Eliza's voice dropped to something cold and final as winter. "You wanted to save me." "Congratulations, Your Grace. You've destroyed me instead. I hope your noble intentions were worth it. I hope they keep you warm at night when you're alone in your mansion, knowing you took a woman who was fighting with everything she had and broke her completely." "Eliza, Don't. Don't say my name like you know me. Like you care." Step back, putting physical distance between them. "If you cared, you would have asked me what I wanted instead of deciding for me. If you cared, you would have treated me like an equal instead of a problem to solve. If you cared, you would have given me the respect of choice instead of the prison of your protection." "I do care. That's why I did this." "No." Eliza shook her head, and the tears kept falling. "You did this because it made you feel powerful. Because solving my problems made you feel less empty inside. Because helping me gave your hollow life some semblance of meaning. But I'm not here to fill your void, Your Grace. I'm not a puzzle for you to solve or a charity case for you to rescue. I'm a person, and you just broke me." She stepped back into the house. Anne followed, casting one last apologetic glance at Adrian before closing the door. It shut with a finality that echoed like a gunshot. Adrian stood on the steps, staring at the closed door, and understood with devastating clarity that Morrison had been right about everything. He'd tried to rescue Eliza, but in doing so, he'd stolen her choice, her dignity, her future. He'd exercised the very power she'd feared most, the power of a man who believed he knew better, who acted without consent because he had the means and the certainty to do so. He'd become exactly what she'd accused him of being, a powerful man who solved problems by overwhelming them, who confused control with care, who took away agency in the name of help. And the worst part? He'd done it all for love. Selfish, desperate, blind love that had seen what he wanted to see and ignored everything else. Behind him, his driver waited patiently. Around him, London continued its business, unaware that on these steps, in this moment, Adrian Blackthorne was realizing he'd lost the only thing that had ever truly mattered. The newspaper was already spreading through the city like disease. By evening, the story would be in every household. Eliza Hartwell, the desperate woman who'd traded her virtue for debt relief. Adrian Blackthorne, the duke who'd bought himself a mistress under the guise of charity. Neither version was true. But truth didn't matter in the face of scandal this delicious. Adrian climbed back into his carriage and gave instructions to return home. As they pulled away from Hartwell House, he looked back one last time at the closed door, at the windows with curtains already drawn against watching eyes, at the home that would soon be empty because he'd made it impossible for them to stay. He'd wanted to save her. Instead, he'd proven her worst fears correct, that some men, no matter how well-intentioned, would always use their power to control. That some women, no matter how strong, would always be crushed by a world that gave them no quarter and no second chances. The carriage turned the corner, and Hartwell House disappeared from view. Adrian leaned back against the seat, closed his eyes, and for the first time in years felt the weight of his title not as privilege but as curse. He'd lost her. And in losing her, he'd lost the only part of himself that had felt real. The scandal consumed London like wildfire in a drought. By nightfall, every drawing room in Mayfair buzzed with speculation. By the next morning, 3 more newspapers had picked up the story, each adding their own salacious details. By week's end, Eliza Hartwell's name was synonymous with ruin, and Adrian Blackthorne's reputation had transformed from untouchable duke to wealthy predator who'd bought a desperate woman's compliance. The city fed on it, gorged on it. The fall of the mighty and the destruction of the innocent, it was a feast society couldn't resist. Adrian spent those days in his study, watching his world fracture through reports delivered by increasingly uncomfortable servants. Letters poured in, some from allies urging him to deny everything, others from enemies savoring his fall, still more from hypocrites who'd attended his balls for years suddenly claiming they'd always suspected something improper about him. His mother, the Dowager Duchess, sent a scathing missive from Bath demanding he fix this disaster immediately, though she offered no suggestions on how. His banker wrote expressing concern about the family's reputation affecting business relationships. Even his tailor sent a polite note suggesting perhaps His Grace might prefer to conduct future fittings at home rather than in the shop where other clients might be uncomfortable. The invitations stopped arriving. The social calls ceased. The world that had once revolved around him turned its back with breathtaking speed. Even Marcus visited less frequently, though when he did come, his face carried the weight of increasingly bad news. "Pemberton's spreading rumors," Marcus said on the 4th day, helping himself to Adrian's brandy without asking. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. Even defending Adrian was taking its toll on him socially. "He's telling everyone you tried to steal Hartwell Manor through manipulation, that you seduced Miss Hartwell to gain control of the property, then discarded the debt to cover your tracks." "That's insane. I forgave the debt entirely. Why would I do that if I wanted the land?" "Which looks worse, don't you see? No man forgives £3,500 without expecting something in return. Society assumes you got what you wanted from her virtue, her body, whatever fiction they prefer, and discarded the evidence by forgiving the debt." Marcus drained his glass and poured another. "Some are even saying you paid her off, that the forgiven debt was payment for services rendered." Adrian's glass shattered in his grip. Blood welled from his palm, mixing with expensive liquor on imported carpet. He stared at it, feeling nothing. The physical pain was insignificant compared to the knowledge of what he'd done to Eliza. "Your Grace!" Marcus started forward, reaching for a handkerchief. "Get out! Adrian, let me help! Get out!" The roar echoed through the study, raw and primal. Marcus backed away, hands raised in surrender, and left without another word. Adrian wrapped his bleeding hand in a handkerchief and returned to the window. Outside, London continued its indifferent march. Carriages rolled past, carrying people to parties he'd no longer be invited to. Street vendors called their wares. Life persisted while his own collapsed inward like a dying star. He'd broken something fundamental with Eliza. Not just trust. Trust could be rebuilt given time and effort. He'd broken the very foundation of who she was. A woman who'd demanded agency in a world that gave her none, and he'd stripped that agency away with money and power and the arrogant certainty that he knew best. The worst part? Even knowing the consequences, even seeing the wreckage spread before him like a battlefield. If he could go back, he'd still try to save her. Because the alternative, watching her destroyed by Pemberton's machinations while he did nothing, was unbearable. That realization terrified him. Love, he was discovering, made monsters of honorable men. It blinded them to everything except the object of their devotion. It convinced them that good intentions justified terrible actions. He'd become the villain in Eliza's story. and he'd done it in the name of love. Across London, in a cramped room above a milliner's shop that smelled of lavender and dust, Eliza was learning her own brutal lessons about survival. "We can't stay here," Anne said, folding their last good dress with shaking hands. Her voice was hollow, exhausted from crying. "Mrs. Pemberley gave us notice this morning. She doesn't want the scandal associated with her establishment. She was polite about it, but firm. We have until Sunday to leave." Eliza stood at the window, watching rain hammer the cobblestones 3 floors below. They'd fled Hartwell House 5 days ago, taking only what they could carry in 2 small trunks. The rest, the furniture, the paintings, her father's precious library, her mother's china, had been seized by creditors the moment the scandal broke. Pemberton had moved with vicious efficiency. With the primary debt now owned by Adrian, Pemberton had called in his other notes immediately. Smaller debts Eliza hadn't known existed, obligations her father had hidden out of shame or desperate optimism, debts to tailors and wine merchants and horse traders, all with Pemberton's fingerprints on them, all structured to come due simultaneously in a crisis. The total was devastating, £7,000 owed to various creditors, all due within 30 days. Hartwell Manor was gone, sold to Pemberton for a fraction of its value in a forced sale. The London house was gone, seized to satisfy the largest secondary debts. Everything was gone. Their father's legacy, their mother's memory, their entire world, erased as if it had never existed. And everyone blamed Eliza for it. "Where will we go?" Anne's voice was small, frightened. At 19, she'd never known anything but comfort and security. Now she was learning what the world did to women without protection or resources. "I don't know." Eliza pressed her forehead against cold glass, watching her breath fog the window. Below, a woman hurried past with her skirts pulled up against the rain. She glanced up at the milliner's shop, recognized it, and her face twisted with contempt before she hurried on. Everyone knew. Everyone judged. "North, perhaps," Eliza continued, her voice mechanical. "Scotland. Somewhere no one knows us. Somewhere we can start over." "And do what? We have no money, no references. No one will hire us after this? You know what they're saying? That you're his? That you—" Anne couldn't finish, dissolving into tears. "I know what they're saying." Eliza's voice was flat, emotionless. She'd cried herself empty the first 3 nights. Now there was nothing left but cold pragmatism. "They're saying I'm a whore who sold herself to a duke, that I'm ruined goods, that any woman who associates with me risks her own reputation. It's not true. Truth doesn't matter. It never has." Eliza turned from the window. Her sister looked so young, so broken. This was Eliza's fault. If she'd just accepted Pemberton's original offer, if she'd sold the estate quickly and quietly, if she'd never caught the Duke's attention, but she had. And now they were both paying the price. "We'll find work that doesn't require references," Eliza said, forcing strength into her voice that she didn't feel. "Factory work, laundry, sewing, anything that pays." Anne's face crumpled with horror. "We're the daughters of an earl." "We were. Past tense." Eliza crossed to her sister and gripped her shoulders. "Listen to me, Anne. That life is over. The sooner we accept it, the sooner we can survive. Father's title means nothing now. Mother's bloodline means nothing. We're just 2 women with no options and no protection. We adapt or we die. Those are the choices." "How can you be so calm about this?" "I'm not calm. I'm furious." And she was. Fury burned in her chest like acid, eating through everything else. But fury doesn't pay rent or buy food, so I'll save it for when I can use it as fuel. Right now, we need to focus on surviving the next week, then the week after, and the week after that. A knock at the door made them both jump. Anne answered it to find a messenger boy, no more than 10, holding an envelope sealed with unfamiliar wax. "For Miss Hartwell," the boy said, eyeing them nervously as if scandal might be contagious. "I'm to wait for a reply." Eliza took the letter with numb fingers and broke the seal. The handwriting was feminine, elegant, educated. "Miss Hartwell, you don't know me, but I know what it means to be destroyed by scandal. I also know the Duke of Ashford better than most, and I know he is not the villain you believe him to be. There are truths you don't know. Lord Pemberton engineered your father's debts deliberately. The Duke discovered this conspiracy and tried to stop it. His methods were clumsy, yes, arrogant, certainly, but his intent was to free you, not control you. Enclosed is proof, documents showing Pemberton's original scheme and the web of debts he created to trap your family. What you do with this information is your choice, but you deserve to know the truth before you decide who your real enemy is. The world is harsh enough without fighting the wrong battles against the wrong enemies. A friend who understands, Eliza's hands trembled as she unfolded the attached documents. Bank records, letters of correspondence. A contract between Pemberton and her father, dated 3 years ago, offering a loan with terms that seemed generous at first glance but contained clauses designed to ensnare. "What is it?" Anne asked, moving to read over her shoulder. Eliza read through the documents twice, her mind racing, piecing together a conspiracy she'd been too close to see. Pemberton had loaned her father money, knowing he couldn't repay it in full. The interest rates were deceptive. Low initially, barely noticeable, then escalating dramatically after the first year. By the time her father realized what he'd signed, he was already caught in a web of debt that tightened with every month. And then there were the letters. Pemberton to her father, written in a tone of concerned friendship, offering extensions on the debt, offering additional loans to cover the growing interest, offering help that was actually poison, each extension coming with new terms, new clauses, tightening the noose incrementally until default was inevitable. Her father's responses grew increasingly desperate, thanking Pemberton for his generosity, assuring him the estate would recover, promising repayment that both men must have known was impossible. It was predatory, calculated, vicious in its patience. "He planned it," Eliza whispered, her voice shaking with rage. "Pemberton planned everything from the beginning. He wanted our estate, so he created a trap that took 3 years to spring. Father wasn't foolish. He was hunted, stalked like prey. And the Duke?" Eliza stared at the documents, seeing the situation with new clarity that made her stomach twist with guilt and confusion. Adrian had discovered Pemberton's scheme and tried to stop it. He'd bought the debt not to control her, but to free her from a trap she didn't even know existed. His crime wasn't manipulation. It was arrogance. The certainty that he could solve her problems without involving her, that his solution was the only solution, that he knew better than she did what she needed. But Pemberton was the architect of her destruction, and now Pemberton was winning while she and Adrian destroyed each other. "Miss?" The messenger boy shifted impatiently, his feet muddy on the threshold. "Is there a reply?" Eliza looked at Anne, at their packed belongings, at the future of poverty and obscurity stretching before them like a prison sentence. Then she looked at the documents again and felt something ignite in her chest. Not hope. Hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Something harder, sharper, more dangerous. Rage. Pure, focused, strategic rage. "Yes," Eliza said, her voice suddenly clear and strong. "There's a reply. Tell your employer I want to meet, tonight, alone. I'll come to wherever she chooses." The boy nodded and scurried off. Anne grabbed Eliza's arm, her grip painful. "What are you doing?" "Fighting back." Eliza's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I've been running, hiding, accepting my ruin like it's some inevitable fate handed down by the gods. But it's not inevitable. Pemberton engineered this. The Duke accelerated it through arrogance, but I'm the one who gets to decide how it ends. How can you fight them? They have all the power, the money, the status, the connections. We have nothing. They have everything to lose. We have nothing left to lose." Eliza met her sister's eyes, and Anne actually flinched at what she saw there. "And that makes me very, very dangerous." "You're scaring me." "Good. I'm scaring myself too. But I'm done being a victim in someone else's story. I'm done being the cautionary tale society tells to keep women in their place. If I'm going to burn, I'll make sure everyone who lit the match burns with me." The meeting took place in a forgotten corner of Hyde Park at midnight. Fog rolled off the Serpentine, turning the world ghostly and indistinct. Eliza arrived alone, wearing her plainest dress, a dark cloak concealing her face and hair. The park was dangerous at this hour. Footpads and worse prowled the shadows. But fear seemed irrelevant when your reputation was already destroyed. A figure emerged from the mist like something from a Gothic novel. Eliza recognized her with genuine shock. Lady Caroline Pemberton, Pemberton's daughter. The same woman who'd pursued the Duke so aggressively last season. You, Eliza breathed, her hand instinctively moving to the knife she'd tucked into her boot. This is a trap. If I wanted to trap you, I'd have sent my father's men, not a letter with evidence of his crimes. Caroline's face was calm, composed, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of shared pain. Please sit. We have much to discuss. She gestured to a bench overlooking the water. Eliza hesitated, then sat, keeping distance between them and her hand near the knife. The cold seeped through her thin cloak immediately, but she refused to shiver. Why would you help me? Eliza demanded. Your father is the one destroying me. You're his daughter, his heir, presumably. Why betray him? Betray him? Caroline's laugh was bitter as winter wind. I'm exposing him. There's a difference, Miss Hartwell. Betrayal implies some loyalty existed to break. I have no loyalty to a man who spent my entire life using me as a pawn in his schemes. So you betray him out of spite? I expose him out of exhaustion. Caroline pulled another envelope from her cloak, thicker than the first. My father is many things. Ambitious, ruthless, brilliant in his way. But above all, he's a bully. He finds people weaker than himself and crushes them, not because he needs to, but because he can. Because it proves his power. I'm tired of watching him destroy lives like they're nothing more than pieces on a chessboard. Why tell me this? Why not expose him yourself? Because I'm his daughter. If I expose him, society will call it a family squabble, dismiss it as a hysterical woman lashing out at her father. But you... Caroline leaned forward, her eyes intense. You're his victim. Your testimony carries weight mine never could. My testimony is worthless. I'm a ruined woman. No one will believe anything I say. Not alone, but with proof, with documentation, with other victims stepping forward because you had the courage to go first. Caroline pushed the envelope across the bench. This contains a full accounting of my father's dealings over the past 5 years. He's done to others what he did to your father. Destroyed families, seized estates, ruined lives. All legally, all carefully documented to avoid prosecution, but the pattern is undeniable. Eliza took the envelope with shaking hands, the paper thick with potential. What am I supposed to do with this? Whatever you want. Expose him publicly. Use it as leverage to negotiate restitution. Burn it and walk away, knowing the truth but choosing survival over justice. The choice is yours, a choice my father and the Duke both tried to take from you. Why help me at all? You don't know me. Caroline's smile was sad, knowing, weighted with experiences Eliza could only imagine. Because I've watched the Duke of Ashford for years, Miss Hartwell. Every woman in London wanted him, myself included, I'll admit. We pursued him like hounds after a fox, trying to trap him into marriage or compromise him into obligation. But he wanted none of us. We were all interchangeable pieces in society's game to him. And then you appeared, and for the first time he looked alive. Real. Human. Caroline's voice softened. Whatever exists between you two, call it love or obsession or mutual destruction, it's the first genuine thing I've seen in this hollow world we inhabit. The first time I've seen a powerful man actually care about something more than his own comfort. It's over. What we had, if we ever had anything, it's destroyed now. Is it? Caroline tilted her head, studying Eliza like a puzzle. He tried to save you and failed spectacularly. You tried to save yourself and failed equally. Maybe you're both fools. Or maybe you're both exactly what the other needs. Someone who refuses to bow to a world that demands submission. He took away my choice. He used his power to make decisions about my life without asking me. How am I supposed to forgive that? I didn't say forgive him. I said use him. Caroline stood, brushing fog dampness from her cloak. He has power, connections, influence you don't possess. You have righteous anger and evidence of Pemberton's crimes. Together, you could destroy my father. Apart, you'll both lose. Him to social exile, you to poverty and obscurity. You're suggesting an alliance with the man who ruined me? I'm suggesting an alliance with the man who tried to save you and accidentally ruined you in the process. There's a difference. Caroline started to walk away, then paused. My father wins because people are too afraid or too proud to fight back. You've lost everything, Miss Hartwell, which means you're the most dangerous opponent he could face. The question is whether you're brave enough to use that power. And what do you get out of this? If I destroy your father, you lose your inheritance, your position, everything. Caroline's smile was cold and satisfied. I get freedom. From his control, his manipulation, his endless schemes, I'd rather be poor and free than wealthy and complicit in his cruelty. Besides, her expression shifted to something almost hopeful. Perhaps if I help destroy him, I can finally sleep at night without hearing the screams of the families he's ruined. She walked away, disappearing into the fog like a ghost, leaving Eliza alone on a bench in a dangerous park at midnight with documents that could destroy a lord and the impossible question of what to do next. Eliza sat there for a long time, fog dampening her cloak, cold seeping into her bones, mind racing through possibilities and consequences. Around her, London slept, unaware that in this moment, on this bench, a woman was choosing between survival and justice, between safety and revenge, between letting her destroyers win or burning everything down to ash. Finally, she stood, tucked the documents carefully inside her cloak, and walked home through dangerous streets with her hand on her knife and a plan forming in her mind. She would fight back. Not alone, she'd learned that lesson, but strategically, carefully, with allies she didn't trust but needed. And if that meant working with the Duke who'd destroyed her reputation to destroy the Lord who'd destroyed her family, so be it. Athena would approve. Strategy over emotion, wisdom over pride. 3 days later, Eliza stood outside the offices of the Morning Chronicle, London's most influential newspaper. The editor, William Blackwood, was known for publishing scandals that toppled governments and ruined reputations. If anyone could expose Pemberton, it was him. But that wasn't why Eliza was here. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights reading Caroline's documents, cross-referencing them with her father's correspondence, understanding the full scope of Pemberton's crimes. He'd destroyed at least 7 families in 5 years, possibly more that hadn't been documented. Always operating just inside the law, always leaving his victims too ashamed or too broken to fight back. Exposing him would be satisfying. It might even restore her reputation slightly, cast her as Pemberton's victim rather than the Duke's willing mistress. Society loved a fallen woman who'd been more wronged against than wronging, but it wouldn't solve anything fundamental. Pemberton would be embarrassed, perhaps forced to make some restitution. But men like him survived scandal. They had too much money, too many connections, too many other powerful men who'd prefer the system remain unchanged because they benefited from it too. No. If Eliza was going to fight, she needed to aim higher, and that meant doing something unthinkable. She needed to ally with the Duke. The realization had come slowly, painfully, fighting against her pride and fury every step of the way. Adrian had wronged her. That was undeniable. But Pemberton had stalked her family for years, and Adrian had tried, however clumsily, to stop it. More importantly, Adrian had power she didn't, access to circles she couldn't reach, influence that could amplify her evidence into something devastating instead of merely embarrassing. Together, they could destroy Pemberton completely. Apart, they'd both lose. Him to social exile, her to poverty, Pemberton walking away victorious. It was strategy. Pure, cold strategy that had nothing to do with forgiveness or trust or the complicated feelings she refused to examine whenever she thought of Adrian's face when she'd called him a destroyer. Athena would approve. Partnership born of necessity, not sentiment. Eliza never made it into the Chronicle's office. As she reached for the door handle, a hand caught her arm. She spun, reaching for her knife, and found herself face to face with Adrian Blackthorne. He looked terrible, haggard, like he'd lost weight and sleep in equal measure. His coat hung slightly loose on his frame, and there were shadows under his eyes that matched her own. His cravat was tied imperfectly. She'd never seen him anything less than perfectly groomed before. The sight of him sent conflicting emotions crashing through her, rage and longing and resentment and something dangerously close to relief. "Don't," he said quietly, his voice rough. "Don't what?" "Don't go to the newspapers. Not yet. Not like this." His hand fell away from her arm, and she noticed it was bandaged. "We need to talk first." "We have nothing to discuss." "We have everything to discuss. Pemberton, the debts, what really happened." Adrian glanced around at the busy street, at the curious eyes already turning their way. Not here. Please, give me 1 hour. Just one. If you still want to expose Pemberton afterward, I'll help you do it. I'll give you every resource I have. Eliza should have refused, should have walked away, published the documents, let the scandal consume them all equally, while she at least got the satisfaction of justice. But something in his eyes stopped her. Not arrogance this time, not the certainty of a man accustomed to getting his way. Desperation, and something that looked terrifyingly like understanding. 1 hour, she said finally, her voice hard. But not anywhere private. I won't give society more ammunition by being seen alone with you in a closed room. The British Museum, 1 hour. I'll be waiting at Athena. Of course you will. She couldn't keep the bitterness from her voice. He walked away before she could say more, disappearing into the London crowds, leaving Eliza standing outside the Chronicle with a choice to make. Trust him one more time, or burn everything down alone. The smart choice was obvious, the safe choice was clear. But Eliza had stopped feeling smart or safe the moment a duke decided to save her. 60 minutes later, Eliza stood before the statue of Athena, the marble goddess of wisdom and warfare, looking down with blank eyes that had witnessed this exact scenario countless times before. Adrian was already there, hands clasped behind his back, staring up at stone perfection as if it might offer answers. She chose strategy over passion, Adrian said without turning, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. Wisdom over emotion, logic over love. I wonder if she was happy. Goddesses don't get to be happy. They get to be right. Eliza moved to stand beside him, maintaining careful distance. And being right is supposed to be enough. Is it? Is being right enough for you? I don't know anymore. Nothing feels like enough. Eliza gestured at the space between them. You said we needed to talk, so talk. Adrian finally looked at her, and the raw pain in his eyes made her breath catch. I'm sorry for everything, for buying the debt without asking you, for thinking I knew better than you what you needed, for destroying your reputation while trying to save your estate, for being so catastrophically, arrogantly wrong about everything that mattered. Apologies are easy. They don't fix anything. I know, but you deserve them anyway. Adrian took a careful breath. I also want you to know that I understand now. What I took from you, it wasn't just choice or agency or control over your own life. It was dignity, the right to fight your own battles and fail on your own terms. I stole that because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of watching you destroyed, of standing by with power and resources and doing nothing while Pemberton crushed you, of... His voice broke slightly. Of losing you before I even had the chance to know you. Eliza's chest tightened. You don't know me. No, but I want to. And that terrified me enough to make catastrophically bad decisions. Adrian pulled documents from his coat, the same documents Caroline had given Eliza, she realized. I know about Pemberton's conspiracy now. I know he engineered your father's debts. I know I tried to stop him in the worst possible way. And I know you have every right to hate me. I don't hate you. The words surprised her as much as they clearly surprised him. I hate what you did. I hate that you had the arrogance to think you could solve my life like it was a problem in a ledger book. But I don't hate you. I think you're a good man who did a terrible thing for complicated reasons. That's more grace than I deserve. Probably. Eliza looked back at Athena. But I didn't come here to grant you forgiveness or absolve you of guilt. I came because I have evidence that could destroy Pemberton, and I need your help to use it effectively. Adrian went very still. You want to work together? I want to form a temporary alliance with a specific goal, destroying the man who actually engineered all of this. Eliza's voice was flat, businesslike. You have power and influence. I have evidence and motivation. Separately, we're both drowning. Together, we might survive. This isn't forgiveness. No, this is strategy. Eliza turned to face him fully. I still don't trust you, Your Grace. I may never trust you again, but I respect your intelligence, and I need your influence. If you're willing to work with me, truly with me, not for me or around me or in spite of me, then we might stand a chance. Equal partners? Adrian's voice was carefully neutral, but hope flickered in his eyes like a candle in wind. Equal partners. You don't make decisions without consulting me. I don't act without informing you. We coordinate every move, every strategy, every public appearance. Clear communication, mutual respect, absolute honesty. And after, when Pemberton is dealt with? Eliza had thought about this, rehearsed the answer until it felt like truth instead of self-protection. After, we go our separate ways. Your reputation recovers. I disappear into obscurity with whatever dignity I can salvage. We survive, if not together, then at least not as enemies. It was a cold bargain. A business arrangement built on mutual need rather than trust or affection. But it was honest, which was more than either of them had managed before. Adrian studied her face for a long moment, as if memorizing it. Then he extended his hand. Partners, then. For however long this takes. On your terms. Eliza stared at his hand, remembering the first time they'd met, the electricity that had sparked between them. That was gone now, burned away by scandal and betrayal and the harsh education of consequences. What remained was something harder, more durable, less romantic but possibly more real. She took his hand. Partners. They shook, and in that moment, an alliance was born. Not of love or trust, but of survival. Two people choosing to fight together because fighting alone meant certain death. Neither knew it yet, but that choice, that cold, calculated, strategic decision, would reshape everything. Because sometimes love doesn't begin with passion. Sometimes it begins with partnership. And sometimes the strongest foundations are built not on romance, but on respect forged in the fires of mutual destruction. The plan they constructed over the next week was audacious to the point of madness. They would host a ball, not just any ball, the social event of the season, held at Adrian's estate, inviting everyone who'd condemned them. Pemberton included. You want to gather our enemies under one roof? Marcus had asked, incredulous, when Adrian explained it to him in the study 3 days after the museum meeting. That's not strategy, that's suicide. It's brilliant, Adrian corrected, and for the first time in weeks, his voice held certainty. Right now, we're scattered, defensive, playing their game on their terms. This puts us in control, forces everyone to come to us, to our territory, on our timeline. And once they're there, what then? We expose Pemberton, publicly, completely, with evidence so damning he can't deny it and witnesses so credible society can't ignore them. Marcus set down his glass carefully. You realize this could backfire spectacularly. If you fail, if the evidence isn't as damning as you think, or if society simply doesn't care, you'll both be finished, permanently. We're already finished by society's standards. This is our chance to rewrite the narrative from destruction to justice. Adrian leaned forward. Pemberton wins if we stay silent. He wins if we slink away in shame. The only way to beat him is to do the one thing he doesn't expect. Fight back openly. With Miss Hartwell at your side. As my equal partner. Yes, Marcus studied him. You love her. That's irrelevant to the strategy. No, it's the entire strategy. You're risking everything for her. I'm risking everything for justice. The fact that Adrian stopped, then started again more quietly. The fact that I care about her is secondary to doing what's right. Keep telling yourself that. But Marcus smiled slightly. I'll help. You'll need allies at this ball, people willing to stand with you when society's judgment comes down. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might all be ruined by week's end. The invitations went out 3 days later, written in careful language that made refusal nearly impossible. The Duke of Ashford requests the honor of your presence at a ball to address recent events and restore truth to society's discourse. The future of several reputations hangs in balance. Your attendance and judgment are required. It was a gauntlet thrown, a challenge issued, an implicit threat that staying away would mark you as either coward or conspirator. Society, sensing blood in the water and unable to resist the spectacle, accepted with gleeful anticipation. 300 invitations sent, 297 acceptances received, including Lord Pemberton's. The night before the ball, Adrian and Eliza met one final time in his study to review their strategy. Anne was there too, nervously arranging documents on the massive desk, while Marcus paced by the window like a caged animal. Pemberton will come, Marcus said, his voice tight with tension. He's too arrogant not to. He'll want to watch you fail publicly. Savor the moment when society rejects your evidence and confirms his victory. Good. Eliza's voice was cold, controlled. She'd changed in the past weeks, Adrian noticed, hardened. The soft edges worn away by scandal and survival, leaving something sharp enough to cut. Let him come. Let him feel secure. The fall will be harder from the height of his arrogance. Adrian watched her across the desk, this woman who'd gone from adversary to ally to something he couldn't quite name. She'd dressed practically today. A simple day dress of dark blue, her hair pulled back severely, no jewelry or adornment. She looked like what she was, a general preparing for battle. She was magnificent and terrifying. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly, needing to hear her say it. Eliza looked up, and for just a moment, he saw past the armor to the fear beneath. Tomorrow night would determine everything. Their futures, their reputations, their very survival in a society that had already judged them guilty. One night, one chance, one opportunity to reclaim their lives from the ashes of their mistakes. "No," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm doing it anyway. That's what warriors do, isn't it? Fight even when afraid, especially when afraid. Athena would be proud. Athena was a goddess. I'm just a woman trying not to drown." She met his eyes across the desk, trying very hard not to drown. "Then we'll swim together." Adrian stood and walked to her side of the desk, maintaining the careful distance they'd negotiated. "Whatever happens tomorrow, Eliza, I want you to know. I never meant to hurt you. I only wanted to save you. I know, but salvation without consent is just another form of prison." She held his gaze steadily. "Tomorrow, we save ourselves. Together. On our terms. Not as savior and victim, but as equals." "Our terms," Adrian agreed, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Anne cleared her throat, breaking the moment. "It's late. We should rest. Tomorrow will be—" She searched for the word. Exhausting doesn't begin to cover it. She was right. They separated, Eliza and Anne to guest rooms Adrian had provided, Marcus to his own townhouse with promises to return early, leaving Adrian alone with his thoughts and the crushing weight of what was to come. Everything depended on tomorrow. One night, one ball, one chance to reclaim their futures from the people who'd tried to destroy them. Adrian walked to the window and looked out over sleeping London, the city that had built him up and torn him down with equal indifference. Somewhere out there, Pemberton was sleeping peacefully, certain of his victory, dreaming perhaps of the estates he'd acquire and the families he'd crush. Somewhere else, closer, Eliza was lying awake in a guest room, planning every word, every movement, preparing for the performance of her life. And here, in this study that had witnessed so many of his failures, Adrian made a decision that felt like both surrender and revolution. If tomorrow went wrong, if Pemberton outmaneuvered them, if society rejected their evidence, if everything collapsed into ruin worse than what they'd already endured, he wouldn't let Eliza fall alone. He'd already destroyed her once with his arrogance and good intentions. If destruction was coming again, he'd make sure it consumed them both equally. Not salvation, partnership, not rescue, solidarity, even unto ruin, especially unto ruin, because that's what partners did. They stood together. They fell together. They faced the consequences of their choices side by side, without flinching, without regret. Adrian pressed his palm against the cold window glass and watched his breath fog the surface. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow we burn it all down or build it all back. Tomorrow, everything changes, and for the first time in weeks, months, perhaps years, Adrian felt something other than emptiness. He felt ready. The ballroom blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off crystal and gold until the entire space seemed to burn. Adrian stood at the top of the grand staircase, watching London's elite flood into his home. The same people who'd whispered about his ruin, who'd savored every detail of the scandal, who'd come tonight expecting either his complete humiliation or Eliza's final destruction. They would get neither. "Impressive turnout," Marcus murmured beside him. "I count at least 300. Everyone who matters is here." "Everyone who wants to watch us bleed," Adrian corrected. Below, faces turned upward, some curious, some hostile, all hungry for spectacle. "Where's Pemberton?" "Just arrived." Southeast corner, near the refreshments, acting like he owns the place. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lord Pemberton stood surrounded by sycophants, his round face flushed with wine and satisfaction. He dressed for victory, burgundy coat, excessive jewelry, the posture of a man who believed himself untouchable. Tonight would teach him otherwise. And Eliza? Upstairs. Anne's with her. She said she needs 5 more minutes. 5 minutes? Adrian checked his pocket watch. 10 o'clock exactly. The ball had officially begun, but the real performance wouldn't start until Eliza appeared. Everything depended on timing, on the careful choreography they'd rehearsed a dozen times. One mistake, one miscalculation, and they'd lose everything. Your Grace, a familiar voice cut through his thoughts. Lady Caroline Pemberton stood at the base of the stairs, her expression unreadable. Quite the gathering. Lady Caroline, I wasn't certain you'd come. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Her eyes flicked toward her father, then back. I trust you received the additional documents I sent? We did. They were, illuminating. Good. Caroline's smile was sharp. My father thinks he's invincible. I'm looking forward to being proven wrong. Just promise me one thing, Your Grace. What's that? When this is over, whatever happens between you and Miss Hartwell, don't waste it. People like us rarely get second chances at something real. She moved away before Adrian could respond, disappearing into the crowd. But her words lingered, settling in his chest like stones. Don't waste it, as if he hadn't already wasted everything that mattered. The clock struck the quarter hour. Time. Adrian descended the stairs, Marcus at his side, moving through the crowd with practiced ease. Conversations paused as he passed. Eyes followed. The whispers started immediately, speculation about why he'd summoned them, what announcement he'd make, whether he'd finally address the scandal. They thought they knew how this evening would unfold. They were wrong. Adrian reached the small orchestra platform at the far end of the ballroom and raised his hand. The music stopped. Conversation died in ripples, spreading outward until 300 people stood in expectant silence. Ladies and gentlemen, Adrian began, his voice carrying to every corner. Thank you for accepting my invitation tonight. I know there have been questions, rumors, speculation about recent events. Murmurs of agreement. Some people looked uncomfortable. Others leaned forward eagerly. Tonight, I intend to provide answers, but first, Adrian gestured toward the grand staircase. I believe someone else deserves to be heard. All eyes turned. Eliza stood at the top of the stairs. Adrian's breath caught. She'd chosen her gown carefully, deep midnight blue that made her skin luminous. Her dark hair swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. But it wasn't the dress that commanded attention. It was her bearing. The way she held herself with absolute composure despite 300 pairs of eyes judging her every move. She descended slowly, each step deliberate, refusing to hurry or falter. The crowd parted for her, some people backing away as if scandal were contagious, others staring with naked curiosity. Eliza reached the platform and stood beside Adrian. Close enough to present a united front, but not touching. Partners, not lovers. Miss Hartwell has agreed to speak tonight, Adrian said. I ask that you extend her the courtesy of your attention. He stepped back, yielding the platform to her. This was her moment, her choice. Everything they'd planned hinged on whether society would listen to a ruined woman. Eliza surveyed the crowd with calm deliberation. When she spoke, her voice was clear and unwavering. Many of you know my name. Most of you know the scandal attached to it. Tonight, I'm going to tell you what you don't know, the truth behind the gossip. Pemberton shifted in the crowd, his face darkening. Adrian caught Marcus's eye across the room, ready. 6 months ago, my father died, Eliza continued. He left behind debts, substantial debts that threatened our estate. What I didn't know then was that those debts were not accidents of poor management. They were calculated traps set by a man who wanted our land. Shocked murmurs rippled through the ballroom. Pemberton's face went from dark to purple. This is outrageous, he sputtered, pushing forward. Your Grace, I demand— You'll have your turn to speak, Pemberton, Adrian said coldly, after Miss Hartwell finishes, unless you're afraid of what she might say. The challenge hung in the air. Pemberton's mouth worked soundlessly, aware that protest would look like guilt. He fell back, fuming. Eliza continued as if uninterrupted. The man who trapped my father was Lord Pemberton. He offered loans with deceptive terms, then used those terms to force default and seize our property. He's done this before, to at least 7 other families that we know of. Lies, Pemberton shouted. These are vicious lies from a desperate woman. Are they? Eliza's voice cut through his bluster. Then explain this. She nodded to Anne, who stood near the orchestra with a stack of documents. Anne began distributing copies to the nearest guests, who read them with widening eyes and passed them along. These are bank records, Eliza said. Letters, contracts, all documenting Lord Pemberton's pattern of predatory lending, the families he's destroyed, the estates he's seized, all legal, all documented, all monstrous. The room erupted. People crowded around those holding documents, reading over shoulders, gasping at what they found. Pemberton's face had gone from purple to ashen. Where did you get those? He demanded, his voice shaking. Those are private. They're evidence, Adrian interrupted, stepping forward. Evidence of systematic fraud. And before you claim Miss Hartwell fabricated them, you should know they've been verified by 3 independent solicitors. Every transaction, every contract, every ruined family. All real. This is a conspiracy, Pemberton's voice rose to a shriek. The Duke is using his influence to destroy me because I refuse to let him have Hartwell Manor without consequences. You mean because you tried to trap Miss Hartwell the same way you trapped her father? Adrian's voice was ice. Yes, I discovered your scheme. Yes, I bought your note to stop you. And yes, I made mistakes in how I handled it. But my mistakes don't erase your crimes. The crowd was fracturing now. Some people backing away from Pemberton in disgust, others demanding to see the documents, a few loyal allies trying to form a protective circle around him. Then a new voice cut through the chaos. He's telling the truth. Everyone turned. Lord Ashbury, an elderly peer known for his integrity, stood holding one of the documents with shaking hands. Pemberton did this to my nephew 3 years ago, Ashbury said, his voice thick with emotion. Loaned him money for improvements on his estate, then called in the debt early when my nephew couldn't pay. I thought it was simple business, but this, he shook the papers. This shows the same pattern, the same deceptive terms. My nephew lost everything, his estate, his reputation, his will to live. He took his own life 2 years ago. Silence fell like a hammer. Ashbury's face was gray, aged a decade in moments. I blame my nephew for poor judgment. I should have blamed Pemberton for murder. Now see here, Pemberton started. No, you see? Ashbury's voice cracked like a whip. You destroyed that boy. You destroyed families, and you did it legally, which makes it worse, not better. You're a predator in gentleman's clothing. More voices rose. Other people coming forward with stories of ruined relatives, suspicious debts, estates lost to Pemberton's machinations. The protective circle around Pemberton crumbled as his own allies began to question, to remember, to piece together their own experiences with his lending practices. Adrian watched it unfold with grim satisfaction. This was what they'd counted on, that Pemberton's victims were scattered, isolated, each believing they were alone in their suffering. Bring them together, show them the pattern, and the truth became undeniable. Pemberton saw it happening, saw his carefully constructed empire of exploitation collapsing in real time, his face twisted with rage and desperation. This is all lies orchestrated by a whore and the Duke who bought her, he screamed, pointing at Eliza. She sold herself to him to save her estate, and now they're trying to destroy me to cover their shame. The accusation landed like a slap. Eliza went pale. Adrian felt fury surge through him, white-hot and barely controlled. Choose your next words very carefully, Pemberton, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. Why? Everyone knows it's true. She spread her legs for a duke, and when society found out, she decided to drag me down with her rather than accept her ruin with dignity. Adrian moved before thinking, closing the distance between them in 3 strides. His fist connected with Pemberton's jaw with a satisfying crack. Pemberton went down hard, blood streaming from his split lip. The ballroom exploded with shouts. Men rushed forward to pull Adrian back. Pemberton scrambled away, holding his face, sputtering threats about legal action and assault charges. Do it, Adrian snarled, shaking off restraining hands. Take me to court. Let's air everything publicly. Let's examine every document, every transaction, every family you've destroyed. I have the best lawyers in England, Pemberton, and unlike you, I have nothing to hide. Your Grace, please. Marcus tried to pull him back. No. Adrian shook him off, his eyes never leaving Pemberton. This ends tonight. You want to call Miss Hartwell names? Fine. But do it knowing that I'll defend her honor with everything I have. My title, my fortune, my reputation, all of it stands between her and men like you. How noble, Pemberton sneered through bloody teeth. The great Duke of Ashford, protecting his investment. She's not an investment. The words tore out of Adrian, raw and honest. She's the only real thing in this entire hollow world. The only person who's ever looked at me and seen a man instead of a title. And yes, I failed her. Yes, I hurt her with my arrogance. But she's worth 100 of you, Pemberton. 1,000. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving it if she'll let me. Silence. Complete, shocked silence. Adrian became aware that he was breathing hard, that 300 people were staring at him with expressions ranging from astonishment to horror to something that might have been respect. And Eliza was looking at him with tears streaming down her face and an expression he couldn't quite read. I didn't ask you to defend me, she said quietly. I know. I don't need your protection. I know that too. Then why? Because I love you. The words fell into silence like stones into still water. I love you, and I've loved you since the moment you told me I looked hungry, despite having everything. You were right. I was starving, and you were the first meal I'd seen in years, the first real, honest, beautiful thing in a world of facades. Your Grace, someone started. I'm not finished. Adrian kept his eyes on Eliza. I know I destroyed us. I know I took your choices away. I know you may never forgive me, and I'll accept that. But I won't stand here and let Pemberton destroy you further while I have breath in my body. So yes, I'll defend you. Not because you need it, but because I need to. Because loving you, even unsuccessfully, even from a distance, is the only thing that makes me feel human. Eliza's hands trembled at her sides. You're making a scene. Good. Let them see. Let all of London know that the Duke of Ashford is in love with Eliza Hartwell. Let them judge. Let them gossip. I don't care anymore. You should care. Your reputation, my reputation is built on a lie. The lie that I'm something special because I was born into privilege. But you earned everything you are. Your intelligence, your strength, your integrity. You didn't inherit it or buy it. You forged it in fire. And that makes you worth more than every person in this room combined. Someone in the crowd started clapping, then another, then more, until half the ballroom was applauding, while the other half stood frozen in shock. Pemberton staggered to his feet, looking around wildly at his crumbling support. This is madness. You're all fools. Can't you see they're manipulating you? The only manipulation here is yours, Lady Caroline said, stepping forward. Her voice was clear, carrying. I'm Lord Pemberton's daughter, and I can confirm every document Miss Hartwell presented is genuine. My father has been destroying families for years. I've watched him do it, and I'm done watching. Caroline, Pemberton lunged toward her. You traitorous little... Adrian caught him by the collar. Touch her, and I'll break more than your jaw. Let him go, Eliza said. Her voice was calm now, controlled. She'd wiped away her tears, and her face was composed. He's finished. She was right. Adrian could see it in the faces around them. The disgust, the betrayal, the dawning realization that they'd been Pemberton's accomplices through their willful ignorance. Adrian released Pemberton, who stumbled back, looking smaller somehow, diminished. Get out, Adrian said quietly, and pray I don't press charges for fraud and conspiracy. You can't. I can. I will. Unless you leave England within the week, permanently. Pemberton's face cycled through rage, fear, calculation. He looked around for support and found none. Even his closest allies had turned away. This isn't over, he hissed. Yes, Eliza said. It is. Pemberton fled, shoving through the crowd, his daughter's betrayal and society's condemnation chasing him like hounds. The ballroom doors slammed behind him, the sound final as a coffin closing. For a moment, no one moved. 300 people stood suspended in the aftermath of revelation and confrontation, unsure how to proceed. Then the Duchess of Marlborough, society's reigning arbiter of propriety, stepped forward. "Miss Hartwell," she said, her voice carrying authority, "you have shown remarkable courage tonight, and you, Your Grace," she turned to Adrian, "have shown that a title is nothing without honor. I think I speak for many when I say we owe you both an apology." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Not everyone. Some people still looked skeptical, others angry at being made to feel guilty. But enough. Enough that the tide had turned. "I don't want apologies," Eliza said. "I want change. I want London to remember what happened here tonight. That power without accountability is tyranny. That silence in the face of injustice is complicity. That—" Her voice broke. She swayed slightly, and Adrian moved instinctively to steady her. "That sometimes," she finished softly, "even the most desperate can find the strength to fight back. If they're not fighting alone." She looked up at Adrian, and in her eyes he saw something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but possibility. A door opening, just a crack. "Thank you," she whispered, so quietly only he could hear, "for defending me, even though I didn't ask." "Always," Adrian whispered back. "Even when you don't ask, even when you don't want it. I'll be there." The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. Then Anne appeared, taking Eliza's arm. "You need to rest," Anne said gently. "This has been too much." Eliza nodded, allowing herself to be led away. But at the base of the stairs she paused and looked back at Adrian. "Tomorrow," she said. "We talk tomorrow, properly." "Tomorrow," Adrian agreed. She climbed the stairs and disappeared, Anne supporting her. The crowd began to disperse, breaking into clusters of intense conversation. The orchestra started playing again, tentatively, trying to restore some normalcy. Marcus appeared at Adrian's elbow. "Well, that was something." "That was everything," Adrian corrected. He felt hollowed out, exhausted, like he'd fought a war in the span of an evening. "Did you mean it? What you said about loving her?" "Every word." "And if she doesn't love you back?" Adrian watched the empty staircase where Eliza had disappeared. "Then I'll love her anyway. From whatever distance she requires. Because she taught me something tonight." "What's that?" "That real strength isn't about power or control. It's about standing beside someone and letting them stand beside you. Equal partners facing the world together." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "You've changed, Adrian. The man I knew 6 months ago would never have admitted weakness in front of society. 6 months ago, I didn't know what strength was." Adrian turned from the stairs. "I thought it was walls and armor and careful distance. But Eliza showed me different. She showed me that vulnerability, real, terrifying vulnerability, is the only true power we have." Philosophical tonight, aren't we? I just destroyed a peer of the realm and confessed my love in front of 300 people. I'm allowed some philosophy. Marcus laughed, and the sound was clean and bright in the aftermath of chaos. The ball continued, but it was changed now. People approached Adrian differently, with respect earned rather than automatic deference. They asked questions about Pemberton's victims, about restitution, about how to ensure such predation never happened again. And Adrian answered, honestly, without pretense, treating each person as an equal rather than a subject. It was exhausting. It was exhilarating. It was real. Near midnight, as the last guest departed, Adrian stood alone in the emptying ballroom. Servants moved quietly, extinguishing candles, collecting abandoned glasses. "Quite the evening, Your Grace." Adrian turned to find Lady Caroline still there, her cloak fastened, ready to leave. "Thank you," Adrian said simply. "For the documents. For your testimony. For everything." "I didn't do it for you," Caroline said. "I did it for every family my father destroyed, but I'm glad it helped Miss Hartwell." She paused. "Do you think she'll forgive you?" "I don't know. But you'll keep trying?" "Until my last breath." Caroline smiled, sad but genuine. "Then maybe there's hope for all of us. Maybe even in this harsh world, love can survive." She left, and Adrian was alone with the dying candles and the weight of what had been accomplished. They'd destroyed Pemberton, exposed his crimes, shifted society's narrative from scandal to justice. But the real battle wasn't over. Because tomorrow, he had to face Eliza. Not as allies against a common enemy, but as two people trying to figure out if what remained between them was worth salvaging. Adrian walked to the grand windows overlooking the gardens. Dawn was still hours away, but he could feel the night ending, the world shifting toward something new. Tomorrow, everything would change again. The question was whether that change would bring them together or tear them, finally, irreparably apart. Adrian didn't sleep. He stood at the window watching darkness fade to gray, then gray to the pale gold of dawn breaking over London. The city stirred slowly, servants lighting fires, vendors setting up carts, life resuming its ordinary rhythm while his own world balanced on a knife's edge. Tomorrow had arrived, and with it, the reckoning. At precisely 9 o'clock, a knock sounded at his study door. Adrian's heart lurched. "Come in." But it wasn't Eliza. Marcus entered, looking haggard, clutching a stack of newspapers. "You need to see these," Marcus said, spreading them across the desk. Adrian scanned the headlines, each more sensational than the last. Pemberton exposed. Duke and mysterious Miss Hartwell reveal years of financial predation. Love and Justice, the scandal that shook society. The fall of Lord Pemberton, a reckoning. "They're calling you a hero," Marcus said. "Both of you. The papers that condemned you last week are now praising your courage." "How convenient," Adrian's voice was bitter. "Yesterday we were scandals. Today we're heroes. Tomorrow will be something else entirely." "Doesn't that please you?" "It disgusts me." Adrian pushed the papers away. "These same writers destroyed Eliza's reputation without evidence. Now they celebrate her without understanding her. None of it is real. None of it matters." "What matters then?" "Her. Only her." Adrian ran a hand through his hair. "Has she sent word?" "Not yet, but it's early." Another knock interrupted. A footman entered, nervous. "Your Grace, Miss Hartwell is here. She's asking to see you." Adrian's throat went dry. "Show her to the blue parlor. I'll be there momentarily." The footman left. Marcus stood, gathering the newspapers. "Whatever happens," Marcus said quietly, "you did the right thing last night. Not the strategic thing, not the careful thing, the right thing. The right thing may still cost me everything. Then at least you'll have paid honestly." Marcus left, and Adrian was alone with his reflection in the window glass. A man who looked older than 32, worn by scandal and love in equal measure. He straightened his cravat, checked his appearance with uncharacteristic nervousness, and went to face his future. Eliza stood by the window in the blue parlor, backlit by morning sun. She'd worn the same midnight blue gown from last night, though she'd changed her hair, pulled back simply, no elaborate styling. She looked tired, beautiful, untouchable. "Miss Hartwell," Adrian said, closing the door behind him. "Thank you for coming. You said we'd talk, properly." She turned from the window. "So let's talk." Adrian gestured to the chairs arranged by the fireplace. Eliza sat, her posture perfect, her hands folded in her lap. Adrian took the chair opposite, maintaining careful distance. "I want to apologize," he began. "Not for stopping Pemberton. I'd do that again, but for how I did it. For taking your choices away. For acting as if my power gave me the right to decide your future. You think an apology fixes it? No. I think it's a beginning, if you'll allow one." Eliza was silent for a long moment, studying him with those extraordinary hazel eyes that had haunted his dreams for months. "Last night," she said finally, "you told 300 people you loved me. Was that strategy, part of the performance?" "No." "Then what was it?" "The truth." Adrian leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "The truth I've been running from because it terrified me. Because loving you means admitting I'm not self-sufficient. That I need someone. That despite all my power and wealth, I'm hollow without you. That's not love, Your Grace. That's dependency." The word stung, but Adrian didn't flinch. "You're right. It started as dependency. You filled a void I didn't know I had, but it became something else, something bigger." "What?" "Partnership. Recognition. You see me, Eliza. Not the title, not the fortune. Me. The man who reads philosophy at dawn because he can't sleep, who walks his estate alone because crowds feel suffocating, who spent his entire life performing a role he never auditioned for. Adrian's voice dropped. You're the first person who ever asked what I wanted instead of what the Duke of Ashford wanted. Do you know how rare that is? And what do you want? You. A life with you. Not as my possession or my project, but as my equal. Building something real together. Eliza stood abruptly and walked to the window. Her reflection in the glass was distorted, unreadable. Do you know what happened after I left last night? She asked. No. I cried for hours. Anne held me while I sobbed like a child. She pressed her palm against the glass. I cried because you defended me when no one else would. Because you stood in front of society and chose me over your reputation. Because for the first time in my life, someone with power used it to protect me instead of control me. Hope flickered in Adrian's chest. But I also cried because I'm terrified. Eliza turned to face him. What you did last night, declaring your love publicly, you trapped me again. Different method, same result. Now, if I reject you, I'm the heartless woman who spurned the Duke who saved her. If I accept you, people will say I manipulated you into it. Either way, I lose my agency. The hope died. Adrian hadn't considered that angle, and the realization was crushing. I didn't think, no you didn't, because you're accustomed to power. You make grand gestures and assume good intentions, excuse the consequences. Eliza's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. I need you to understand something, Adrian. I can't be with a man who solves problems by overwhelming them. I need a partner who asks before acting, who trusts me to fight my own battles, who stands beside me, not in front of me. I understand. Do you? Because last night you punched Pemberton. You issued ultimatums. You made declarations, all without consulting me first. He called you? Adrian's jaw clenched at the memory. A whore. I know. I was there. Eliza crossed her arms. And yes, it hurt. But it was my hurt to address, my honor to defend. You took that from me. I couldn't just stand there. Why not? Why couldn't you trust that I could handle it, that I've been handling cruelty my entire life and survived without you? Her voice rose. This is exactly the problem. You see me suffering and immediately move to fix it. But some things can't be fixed by someone else. Some battles have to be fought alone to mean anything. Adrian stood slowly, understanding dawning with painful clarity. You're saying no to everything. I'm saying I don't know. Eliza's composure cracked slightly. I'm saying I'm exhausted from being everyone's pawn. Pemberton's victim. Your project. Society's scandal. I need time to figure out who Eliza Hartwell is when she's not defined by crisis. How much time? I don't know that either. The silence stretched between them, heavy with words unsaid and futures uncertain. What if... Adrian began, then stopped. Started again. What if we approach this differently? How? What if I proved I could be the partner you need, not through grand gestures or public declarations, but through patience and restraint? Adrian chose his words carefully. What if I gave you space and autonomy and demonstrated through action, not words, that I respect your choices? You'd wait? Indefinitely? If that's what you need. Eliza studied him, searching for deception and finding only weary honesty. Why? Why would you put yourself through that? Because you're worth waiting for. Because real love isn't about possession. It's about wanting someone's happiness more than your own comfort. Adrian managed a small smile. You taught me that. You and your stubborn refusal to be anything less than yourself. I never taught you anything. You taught me everything that matters. Eliza's eyes filled with tears, though none fell. She looked young suddenly, vulnerable beneath the armor she'd constructed. I'm so tired, Adrian, she whispered. Tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of surviving. Then rest. I'll fight for both of us until you're ready to fight again. That's not partnership. That's you protecting me again. No, partnership is knowing when to carry someone and when to let them walk. Right now you need to walk alone. So I'll wait. Here, ready to walk beside you whenever you're ready. A knock interrupted them. The footman again, apologetic. Your Grace, forgive me, but there's a situation. Lord Ashbury and several other peers are here. They're asking for Miss Hartwell specifically. Eliza and Adrian exchanged glances. Show them to the drawing room, Adrian said. We'll be there shortly. The footman left. Eliza wiped her eyes quickly, restoring her composure. What do they want? She asked. Only one way to find out. They walked to the drawing room together, not touching but moving in sync, a preview of the partnership they might become if circumstances allowed. 7 men waited in the drawing room, all peers of significant standing. Lord Ashbury stood at their center, his face grave but determined. Miss Hartwell, Ashbury said, bowing, thank you for seeing us. My lord, Eliza's voice was cautious. How may I help you? We've come to make amends, Ashbury gestured to his companions. We represent several families who were victimized by Pemberton's schemes. Your courage last night, exposing him publicly, gave us permission to acknowledge our own losses we'd hidden out of shame. I don't understand, Eliza said. We want to help you rebuild, another peer said. Lord Fairfax, Adrian recognized. Pemberton destroyed your family's estate. We want to fund its restoration, not as charity, but as restitution. We should have stopped Pemberton years ago. We didn't. This is our way of making it right. Eliza went very still. You want to give me money? We want to give you back what was stolen, Ashbury corrected. Your home, your legacy, your future. Eliza looked at Adrian, her expression helpless. Adrian understood the trap immediately. Another grand gesture. Another exercise of power over her life. But this time he wouldn't interfere. He caught her eye and gave the smallest shake of his head. Your choice. Eliza took a breath and turned back to the assembled lords. That's generous, she said carefully. But I can't accept. Shock rippled through the group. Miss Hartwell, Fairfax began. I can't accept because charity, even well-intentioned charity, doesn't solve anything. It just creates new obligations. Eliza's voice strengthened as she spoke. What I need isn't money. It's opportunity. A chance to rebuild on my own terms. What are you proposing? Ashbury asked. A loan, with fair terms and reasonable interest. Let me restore Hartwell Manor using your funds, but as a business arrangement, not a gift. Let me prove I can manage my own affairs. The lords exchanged glances. Adrian felt pride surge through him. This was Eliza at her finest, refusing to be saved, demanding to save herself. And if you can't repay, one lord asked skeptically. Then you seize the estate, same as any creditor. But I will repay. Every penny. Eliza's chin lifted. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for a fair chance. That's all I've ever wanted. Ashbury smiled, the first genuine smile Adrian had seen from the old man in years. You have spirit, Miss Hartwell. Very well. We'll draw up loan documents. 5% interest. Repayment over 10 years. Acceptable? More than acceptable. Thank you. The lords bowed and departed, already discussing terms and logistics. Eliza watched them go, her expression unreadable. That was well done, Adrian said quietly when they were alone again. I learned from the best. She glanced at him. Strategy over emotion. Isn't that what you'd have done? No, I'd have taken their money and been grateful. You demanded respect instead. That's better. Is it? Or is it just pride? It's self-determination. The thing I tried to take from you. Adrian moved closer, careful to maintain distance. You're going to rebuild Hartwell Manor? I'm going to try. You'll need help. Estate management, renovations, tenant relations. I'll manage. I know you will, but there's no shame in accepting assistance. Freely given, no strings attached. Eliza turned to face him fully. What are you offering? My steward's expertise, my architect's advice, access to my contacts and resources. Adrian held up a hand before she could protest. Not as favors, as business arrangements. You pay fair rates, you maintain control, you make all decisions. I'm simply offering access to resources you'd otherwise have to find yourself. Why? Because watching you succeed will bring me more joy than anything I could accomplish alone. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. Adrian met her eyes. I love you, Eliza. I'll love you whether you rebuild Hartwell Manor or sell it, whether you accept my help or reject it, whether you eventually want me in your life or decide I'm too much risk. My love isn't conditional on your choices. It just is. Eliza's breath caught. You're making this very difficult. Loving someone usually is. I meant difficult to stay angry at you. Good. I'd rather you be conflicted than certain you hate me. A laugh escaped her, small, surprised, genuine. You're impossible. I'm in love. There's a difference. The moment stretched between them, fragile but real. Then Eliza stepped back, restoring distance. I need time, she said. Real time. Weeks, maybe months. I need to rebuild my life before I can consider sharing it. I'll wait. You say that now, I'll wait, Adrian repeated firmly, however long it takes. And while you rebuild Hartwell Manor, I'll rebuild myself. Become the man you deserve, the partner you need. And if that's not enough, if I decide we're too different, too damaged, then I'll accept it, mourn it, and spend the rest of my life grateful I knew you at all. Eliza's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Why do you have to say things like that? Because they're true. And because you taught me that truth, however painful, is worth more than comfortable lies. She nodded slowly, accepting his words if not fully believing them. I should go. Anne will worry. Let me have a carriage prepared. I'll walk. I need the air. Adrian wanted to argue, to insist on protection and comfort. But he caught himself, recognizing the impulse for what it was. Control dressed as care. As you wish, he said instead. Eliza started toward the door, then paused. Adrian? His name from her lips was a revelation. Not Your Grace or Duke Blackthorn, just Adrian. Yes? Thank you. For last night. For defending me. For... Her voice caught. For loving me enough to let me go. I'm not letting you go. I'm letting you choose. She smiled, sad but genuine, and left. Adrian stood alone in the drawing room, listening to her footsteps fade, feeling the emptiness settle around him like an old familiar coat. But it was different this time. Not the hollow emptiness of before. This was the purposeful emptiness of waiting, of patience, of love that didn't demand immediate gratification. Marcus appeared in the doorway. She's gone? For now. Will she come back? I don't know. Adrian turned from the empty doorway. But I'll be here if she does. And if she doesn't, I'll still be better for having known her. That's very philosophical for a man who just lost everything. I haven't lost everything. I've lost certainty. There's a difference. Adrian managed a smile. Certainty is overrated anyway. It makes you arrogant. Speaking from experience? Extensively. Over the following months, London watched an unprecedented transformation. Lord Pemberton fled to the continent, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. His daughter Caroline emerged from his shadow and became an unexpected voice for financial reform, using her inside knowledge to push for lending regulations that would prevent future predation. The families Pemberton had victimized began to rebuild, supported by a fund Ashbury established using seized Pemberton assets. Some estates were saved, others were sold, but with dignity and fair compensation. And Eliza Hartwell returned to Derbyshire. Adrian received reports from his steward, who traveled to Hartwell Manor at Eliza's request to assess renovation needs. The estate was in worse shape than expected. Years of neglect had taken their toll. But Eliza approached the challenge with characteristic determination. She hired workers from the village, paying fair wages. She consulted with tenants about improvements. She converted part of the manor into a school, teaching estate management to daughters of gentry who'd been denied such education. Hartwell Manor became something new, not just a family estate, but a symbol of resilience and reinvention. Adrian followed her progress from afar, keeping his promise to give her space. He sent resources when requested, an architect's plans, a master gardener's advice, contacts for suppliers, always with invoices attached, always at fair rates, never as gifts. He wrote letters weekly. Not love letters, he'd learned that lesson. Instead, he shared observations about estate management, asked her opinion on policy questions, treated her as the intelligent equal she'd always been. Some letters she answered, others went unreturned. Adrian accepted both with equal grace. His own transformation was quieter but no less profound. He used his position in Parliament to push for the same lending reforms Caroline championed. He opened his estate to tenant representation in management decisions. He became known not for his wealth, but for his fairness. Society, ever fickle, embraced the new narrative. The Duke of Ashford, transformed by love and humility. The romantic story of a powerful man brought low by his own arrogance and rebuilt by patient devotion. Adrian ignored most of it. His transformation wasn't for society's approval, it was for himself. And for the possibility, however remote, that Eliza might one day choose him. 8 months after their last conversation, a letter arrived that was different from the others. Adrian, Hartwell Manor is finished. The renovations are complete, the school is thriving, and the estate is profitable for the first time in a decade. I've repaid half the loan already. At this rate, I'll own it free and clear in 5 years. I'm writing to invite you to see it, not as a suitor or a savior, but as a friend who offered resources when I needed them. You should see what your architects helped build. If you're still interested in visiting, that is. I'll understand if you've moved on. 8 months is a long time to wait for someone who couldn't promise anything. Yours in gratitude, Eliza. Adrian read the letter 3 times, his heart hammering. Then he called for his steward. "Prepare my carriage," he said. "We're going to Derbyshire." "When, Your Grace?" "Now, today, immediately." "Should I send word ahead?" Adrian paused, considering. The old Adrian would have arrived unannounced, making a grand gesture. The new Adrian knew better. "Yes, send word that I'll arrive in 3 days. And Marcus, pack light. I'm staying at the village inn, not imposing on Miss Hartwell's hospitality." Marcus grinned. "You really have changed." "I'm trying to. We'll see if it's enough." 3 days later, Adrian's carriage rolled through the gates of Hartwell Manor, and his breath caught. The estate was transformed. New fences lined the drive. Fields that had lain fallow now flourished with crops. The manor itself had been restored to glory, fresh paint, repaired stonework, windows gleaming in afternoon sun. But it was the school building that stopped him. Converted from an old stable, it now housed 24 young women bent over ledgers and maps, learning estate management from a woman who stood at the front of the room, her dark hair pulled back, her voice carrying clearly through open windows. Eliza. Adrian stepped from the carriage and simply listened. "Never assume a tenant is lying about hardship," Eliza was saying. "Verify, yes, but start from a position of trust, not suspicion. These are people, not assets. Treat them accordingly." A student raised her hand. "But what if they take advantage?" "Then you address it fairly, set consequences. Enforce them consistently, but don't punish everyone for one person's dishonesty. That's lazy management." "Miss Hartwell?" Another student. "What if the landowner disagrees with your approach?" Eliza smiled. "Then you explain your reasoning, present evidence. And if they still disagree, you decide whether you can work within their framework or need to find employment elsewhere. Never compromise your integrity for a position. You're worth more than that." Adrian felt something shift in his chest. This was Eliza in her element, teaching, leading, transforming her trauma into wisdom for the next generation. She was magnificent. The lesson ended. Students filed out, chattering excitedly. Eliza gathered her papers, and only then did she notice Adrian standing at the edge of the courtyard. She went very still. Then, slowly, she smiled. "Your Grace," she called, walking toward him. "You came!" "You invited me." "I did, but I wasn't certain you'd accept." "I'd cross England on foot if you asked." Adrian caught himself. "Sorry, I'm trying to be less dramatic." Eliza laughed, the first free, unguarded laugh he'd heard from her in nearly a year. "Please don't change too much. Some drama keeps things interesting." They stood awkwardly for a moment, 2 people who'd shared scandal and salvation, now uncertain how to simply be together. "Would you like a tour?" Eliza asked finally. "I'd love one." She showed him everything, the restored manor, the thriving fields, the school where young women learned skills society typically denied them. She spoke with pride about the tenants, the workers, the small community she'd built from ruins. Adrian listened, asked questions, marveled at what she'd accomplished in 8 months. This was her victory, earned through intelligence and perseverance. No grand gestures from a duke could have created this. They ended the tour in the library, standing before a portrait of Eliza's father. "I was angry at him for so long," Eliza said quietly. "For the debts, the secrets, the mess he left. But I understand now. He was trying to save something too. He just didn't know how. You saved it for him. We saved it. Your architects, your steward's advice. I couldn't have done this alone. You could have. It would have taken longer, but you'd have found a way. Eliza turned to face him. Is that what you've been doing these months? Finding ways to minimize your contribution? I've been learning to be comfortable with uncertainty, with patience, with loving someone enough to let them choose their own path. That must have been difficult for a duke accustomed to control. Excruciating, Adrian admitted, but necessary. You were right about everything. I operated from power, not partnership. I solved problems by overwhelming them. I needed to learn a different way. And have you learned? I'm trying, daily, imperfectly. Adrian met her eyes. But I'm not the same man who bought your debt without asking. I've spent 8 months proving that to myself. The question is whether I can prove it to you. Eliza was quiet for a long moment, studying his face as if searching for deception. I read your letters, she said finally. Every one. Some I answered, others I didn't. But I read them all. I know. Your responses and your silences taught me patience. Did you mean what you said? About waiting indefinitely? Every word. What if... Eliza's voice dropped, vulnerable. What if I'm still not ready? What if I need more time? Then I'll wait more time. That's not fair to you. Fairness is overrated. Love isn't about fair exchange. It's about wanting someone's happiness more than your own timeline. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. You keep saying things like that. Because they're true. And because Adrian took a careful step closer. Because loving you taught me that I'd rather have uncertainty with you than certainty with anyone else. I'm difficult, stubborn, damaged by what we went through. I'm arrogant, impatient, scarred by my own mistakes. We're both imperfect. Adrian smiled. Maybe that's exactly why we fit. Or why we'll destroy each other. Possibly. But I'd rather risk destruction with you than settle for safety without you. Eliza laughed through tears. That's the most romantic and terrifying thing anyone's ever said to me. I contain multitudes. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Adrian held his breath, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell was building. I thought I needed time to become whole before I could love someone, Eliza said softly. But these months taught me something different. We don't become whole, then find love. We find love, and it makes us whole. Messy, imperfect, but whole. Eliza, I'm still afraid of losing myself, of being controlled, of loving you so much it consumes me. Then we'll set boundaries, check in constantly, build something where fear has no power because trust is stronger. Adrian reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back. When she didn't, he took her hand. I'm afraid too, of failing you again, of reverting to old patterns, of being too much or not enough. But I'm more afraid of living without you. What if we fail? Then we fail together, and pick ourselves up together, and try again. That's what partners do. Eliza looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face. Partners. Equals. In everything. Even when we disagree? Especially then. You challenge me, Eliza. You make me better. Angrier sometimes, but always better. She smiled through tears. You're very good with words for a man who spent 8 months proving he could shut up and listen. I learned from necessity. You're terrifying when angry. I learned that from you. Good. The world needs more terrifying women willing to burn it down and rebuild it better. Eliza laughed, then sobered. If we do this, if we try this, I need promises. Anything. Don't interrupt. Hear them all first. She took a breath. I need equal partnership in all decisions. I need the freedom to disagree with you publicly. I need to keep Hartwell Manor separate from your holdings. Mine, not ours, at least initially. I need... Adrian kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull back. Instead, she leaned in, her free hand coming up to cup his face, kissing him back with months of longing and fear and hope tangled together. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. Sorry, he murmured. You said not to interrupt. That was an acceptable interruption. I'll note that for future reference. You do that. Eliza's smile was radiant. Did I mention I'm still listing conditions? List away. I'll agree to all of them. You don't know what they are yet. Don't care. Whatever keeps you in my life, I'll agree to. Even if I demand separate bedrooms? Even then, though I'd negotiate for visiting privileges. Even if I insist on continuing my school despite society's disapproval? I'd help you expand it to 3 schools. Even if I refuse to take your name in marriage and insist on remaining Miss Hartwell? Adrian pulled back slightly to look at her. Are we discussing marriage? I don't know. Are we? I've been in love with you for a year. I'd marry you tomorrow if you'd have me. That's too fast. The next week. Next month. Next year. Whenever you're ready. Eliza bit her lip, fighting a smile. You're very determined. I'm very in love. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. Determination is about control. Love is about commitment, regardless of outcome. Adrian tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I'm committed to you, Eliza Hartwell, to building a life where you're free to be exactly who you are, where your strength doesn't threaten me, where your independence is celebrated, not constrained, where we stand together against a world that will judge us and love each other anyway. That's a beautiful speech. I've had 8 months to practice. It shows. Eliza's expression grew serious. I can't promise perfection. I'll doubt you sometimes, test you, push back when old fears resurface. Good. I need someone who won't let me slide back into arrogance. I'll probably remind you of your mistakes. I'm counting on it. I'll be difficult and stubborn and refuse to simply agree with you. That's why I love you. Eliza shook her head, laughing. You're impossible. I'm in love. How many times do I have to explain the difference? At least a few hundred more. I'm a slow learner. Lucky for you, I'm a patient teacher now. She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, just certainty and choice, and the beginning of something built on ruins and stronger for it. When they finally broke apart, evening had fallen over Hartwell Manor. Through the windows, Adrian could see lights in the village, smoke rising from chimneys, life continuing its ordinary patterns while his own life transformed completely. Stay for dinner, Eliza said. Anne will want to see you, and you should meet some of the teachers. We're doing interesting work here. I'd love to, but I'm staying at the village inn. Nonsense, we have guest rooms, unless you're afraid society will talk. Society is always talking. Let them talk. Adrian pulled her close. I stopped caring what society thinks the moment you slammed a door in my face and called me arrogant. I never said arrogant. You implied it heavily. Fair. Eliza rested her head against his chest. What happens now? Now we build. Slowly, carefully, together. Adrian pressed a kiss to her hair. We make mistakes and fix them. We disagree and work through it. We create something that's ours, not society's, not anyone's expectations, but genuinely ours. That sounds terrifying. That sounds perfect. They stood together in the library, 2 people who'd been broken by power and rebuilt by love, watching night fall over an estate that symbolized everything they'd fought for: survival, dignity, choice. Outside, London continued its ruthless march. But here, in Derbyshire, in a manner restored by intelligence and will, 2 imperfect people had found something that defied all of society's rules. They'd found partnership, equals standing together against a world that insisted on hierarchy. And in finding it, they'd proven something radical, that true power comes not from control, but from choosing each other, daily, imperfectly, honestly, from refusing to bow to anything less. 2 years later, the marriage of Adrian Blackthorne, Duke of Ashford, to Eliza Hartwell, took place at Hartwell Manor rather than in London. It was a small affair, family, close friends, the teachers and workers who'd helped rebuild the estate. Eliza wore deep green instead of white. She wrote her own vows. She kept her name professionally, becoming known as Miss Hartwell Blackthorne in business dealings. Society was scandalized. Adrian and Eliza didn't care. They split their time between estates, building a network of schools that taught practical skills to women denied traditional power. They invested in tenant welfare, fair lending practices, and agricultural innovation. They fought publicly, made up privately, and built a marriage based on respect rather than romance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in a world built on facades and false certainty, real was the rarest treasure of all. On their second anniversary, standing together in the fields of Hartwell Manor watching the sunset, Adrian turned to his wife. "Happy?" he asked. Eliza considered the question seriously. "Challenged, exhausted, occasionally frustrated, frequently exasperated with you." "That's not a no. That's a yes to something better than happiness. It's a yes to partnership." "Even when I'm insufferable?" "Especially then. You're most interesting when you're wrong and having to admit it." Adrian laughed and pulled her close. "I love you. I know. You tell me constantly. And you?" "I love you too. Against my better judgment, frequently to my detriment, but completely." "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." "Don't let it go to your head. Too late." They stood together as night fell. Two people who'd found each other in scandal and chaos, who'd built something real from ruins, who'd proven that even in the harshest world, love, real, difficult, honest love, could survive. Not in spite of their imperfections, but because of them.